Hello everyone, welcome back to another stream. Hope you're all doing well. They have just now released a new Armored Core gameplay video with a lot of community content creators getting to play it and show it off pretty live, which is pretty interesting. I didn't look at a lot of it because I was preoccupied with some other things, but definitely looks interesting, better than some of the stuff that I'd seen on the trailer so far. And they also showed off a little bit of PvP, so if you guys are interested in Armored Core, there's a lot to check out today. Yeah, we were on the grind when it happened in Destiny, but that's what I get for waiting until the end of the season to try to complete my goals of getting all of the cosmetics and stuff. But alright, yeah, so yesterday we had a fun stream looking at 3 videos by Ember about the best and worst of every Souls game, specifically the areas and the enemies. That actually took up a lot more time than I expected it would for, some very short 10-minute videos. We spent like an hour and a half on, no, maybe it was like closer to 2 hours for all 3 of these. And then we finished things off with a video by Rasputin, just so I had like a bit of a better point of reference for somebody who's never really played Soulsborns or video games that much. So that was very insightful and very surprising in many ways. So I did have the videos confused because I don't remember exactly what had happened, but I guess topics were just kind of bouncing around. And so for some reason I thought Rasputin got a lot of hate on their video, but apparently it was Noah Caldwell Gervais who had the issues with the FromSoft community at large. So their video is 5 hours long. I'm not exactly sure if I'll ever really watch that on stream, but I do have it like queued up just so I can at least see what triggered the toxic FromSoft fans. Not that I'm like dying to know, because it's a little bit embarrassing and saddening and all that, but at the very least we did have some other people like commenting about it in the Discord last night. So my mistake on the video by Rasputin yesterday, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless. So today we'll be moving into Elden Ring lore, The Great Works Part 1 by the Centered Tarnished. I haven't heard of them before. This video was recommended to me fairly recently, so we added that. Then we have another video by Minespatch. He pops into the stream every now and then. He's also on the Discord. It's Lorebites, Gavlan, the Gyrm from like Dark Souls 2. And then we'll finish off the night with either 1 or 2 videos by Max Derrat. So Alchemy explains so much about Elden Ring's story, Marika secret revealed in caps, as well as Sekiro and Elden Ring, an undiscovered, mind-blowing connection. So we've certainly got a lot cut out for us tonight. So Mortis, I don't remember if I said hello to you, but yeah, welcome back to the stream. Renus Iris, that's kind of hard to parse. Welcome into the stream, nice to see you. Clown Scum, Scowl Easy, as always. You liked Noah's video when you watched it? It was a nice perspective from a new player. Okay, so is Noah also new to like the FromSoft games? Is that why he got a lot of hate? Or I think, let me reread that title. I beat the Dark Souls trilogy and all I made was this lousy video essay. Yeah, I think I saw this title maybe like when it first came out, but I just didn't get around to it, probably because of the length of the video. So I'll need to like look at that sometime eventually. More lore than there seems. Beans and Rice, welcome back to the stream. You've been working on a webcomic, which you're not going to tell me the name of because advertising is lame. Yeah, if you ever make stuff, you're more than welcome to throw it into the content creation tab on the Discord. Really interested to see like what the community works on, not just me. Yeah, so welcome on in. Today we will begin with whatever I just said. Oh yeah, Elden Ring lore, The Great Works Part 1 by the Centered Tarnished. So a little bit apprehensive when we have the real story of Elden Ring. And I say that as somebody who made like the real story or Bloodborne's true story explained. These are always some very bold clickbaity claims, but let's see how well it holds up. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell by C.G. Jung. So it's kind of interesting. I feel like they could have updated the resolution on this a little bit because it's a little bit stretched out. Looks a little bit awkward. A little bit. All right. Yeah, YouTube is all clickbait. You're right. And welcome back to the stream, Stella.
Elden Ring is full of mysteries.
Oh, that was so weird. Like that pause. Like I was just stopping to like swig a little bit of water, and then like with the music stopped, and then his voice came in. So I thought like my video was like breaking or something like that.
Elden Ring is full of mysteries. Mysteries that don't seem to add up or that have no dots connecting them. Some of these mysteries include: who really is Marika? A goddess? Puppet of the Greater Will? What is the Greater Will? What is the Elden Ring? Have Marika and Radagon always been one? What are the implications of that? What does it mean if they were two individuals that somehow morphed into one? And what the heck is the Elden Beast? These questions have plagued the community since the game first came out. The lore hunting community has done an amazing job this far trying to answer these questions, and have made brilliant connections to various mythos, alchemy, and symbolism. I am simply building off their foundations and adding in my own finds. In this series of videos, I will attempt to unify these different mysteries into one coherent theory, a theory that will hopefully shed light on what is happening in-game, and the story that Miyazaki and George R. R. Martin were trying to tell us. This comprehensive theory comes by way of human psychology, alchemy, and astrology, specifically from a genius named Carl Jung and his theory on the human psyche and the process of individuation.
It's a good thing Teen Sith isn't in the chat right now to hate on this video, because she is your average Jung hater, as she would say herself. And Astanex, welcome back to the stream. Yeah, if you don't get notifications, I can't really control that. It's a real pain. Hey gamers, make sure you click the bell for notifications. And honestly, if you're still getting issues with that, as for often as I advertise the Discord, it is kind of nice because I can send everyone a notification for when I'm going live. She's right, Jung is terrible. I mean, I feel like all of the very early psychologists like him and Freud were kind of terrible in their own ways. Well, many ways, to be honest, but some of his ideas I like, because if you don't take them seriously, and that's kind of like, I kind of look at Jung like astrology for men, if that makes sense, where a lot of people really latch onto the idea of the archetypes and stuff. They're kind of like the zodiacs in some ways, if that makes sense. Is Jung as bad as Kant or not? I would say, well, I mean, that just kind of depends on your personal philosophy. Like, a lot of people like Kant. Yeah, that's just a very loaded question, Scowleasy. Yeah, okay.
Also known as uniting the opposites. Carl Jung was a renowned psychologist of the 20th century and a pupil of Freud. Jung expanded on Freud's ideas of human development and coined the term individuation, a process of deep psychological development. Jung also connected the process of individuation to the alchemical process of the magnum opus, or the great work, with the result being the convergence and realization of one's true divine self. Although this process of individuation is incredibly important, and what I believe is the main story of the game, we must first lay the foundation for which to grow on. This foundation is the very concepts of the human psyche as told to us by Jung. In this video, I will cover the concepts of Jung's theory and connect them to our more mysterious characters within Elden Ring. As I mentioned, this first video is just to build the foundation for the rest of the upcoming videos. It is not intended to answer every question just yet, but rather to build the framework from which we can answer those questions. Before I begin, I want to show you an image that will hopefully get you on board to stick with me through this journey. What you see on screen is the result of a Reddit user asking AI to make an image of Jung's model of the human psyche. Compare that to this painting in game.
I kind of already hate that comparison right there, just because I am a pretty big avid hater of the whole AI generated art and stuff, because it's just really ethically questionable to me on many levels. I wish there was a more ethical, like, bank for the AI to get generated off of, like Artwork Bank or something like that. But yeah, I feel like this is already kind of off to a very big stretch for me. Mortis is furious. Yeah.
Here's another AI image. And here is the Elden Beast.
This just ain't it, man. Hey, Mercy, welcome into the stream. Like, he doesn't even set up what this AI image is supposed to be. Is it still supposed to be the Jung's model of the human psyche? I'm assuming so, because otherwise that would just be one hell of a transition there. Stop this at once. I'm sorry. It was just a tormentor. I wasn't the only one that saw it, but I didn't want to say it. So yeah, if anybody isn't familiar with Destiny 2, this kind of very much looks like an enemy from that game. It really means nothing to you? Okay. Yeah, I really don't like to dunk on other content creators' works, but hopefully it gets better.
Image. And here is the Elden Beast. These images are incredibly powerful and, in my opinion, undoubtedly show the connections of Jung's theories and Elden Ring.
I noticed I muted myself when I paused the video this time, so that's good news. I was going to say, I almost feel like he also cherry-picked the position of the Elden Beast, because, I mean, you're kind of pretty much ignoring all of the aquiline fins and stuff that goes along its body just to kind of fit the profile of this. So, yeah, I have multiple gripes with this on kind of a fundamental level, so that's not the best start for me here.
Another important point to add here is that each character of importance represents many different things. For example, Marika represents the ego and the Great Mother archetype in psychology. She is also represented as Earth in astrology and the Holy Trinity spiritually.
Ooh, he's having some audio issues. Greg, welcome to the stream. You said you might have missed something, but what's the point with the images? So he's trying to connect Carl Jung's psychology to Elden Ring, and so he put in, I guess, an AI generator, like a prompt that said, like, what did he say exactly? Like Carl Jung's psychology of man? I
want to show you an image that will hopefully get you on board to stick with me through this journey. What you see on screen is the result of a Reddit user asking AI to make an image of Jung's model of the human psyche.
All right, so an AI image of Jung's model of the human psyche. Let me type that in. An AI image of Jung's model of the human psyche. Because otherwise I feel like I might forget what he said verbatim here, but okay. Let's move on back forward. Humble Gamer, nice to see you again, as well as Jan Jarvis.
But think to yourself, characters are bringing this up out of Earth in astrology, or archetype in psychology. She is also represented as Earth in astrology and the Holy Trinity spiritually. I bring this up out of necessity because this game is multi-layered, which means the characters are as well.
I mean, obviously I didn't jump forward from where we were, but I think that's a really big non sequitur. And non sequitur means like it doesn't follow from what came like before it. So
another important point to add here is that each character of importance represents many different things. For example, Marika represents the ego and the Great Mother archetype in psychology. She is also represented as Earth in astrology.
So I feel like he would really need to substantiate these claims. I don't feel like all of them are problematic because, I mean, she is kind of a maternal figure, so that kind of makes sense. It would be nice if he gave his reasons as to why she was the ego or even the Earth specifically. And this isn't to say that, like, these comparisons aren't apt. It's just it's a lot harder to get people on board if you don't provide a reason for them to just believe in those claims. So I could potentially be swayed to the idea that Marika represents the Earth because the stakes of Marika are like put into the ground and their role is to like keep the fabric of reality sort of together. Although like that's not as obvious in English. There's like a tooltip about it, but like the Japanese makes it like a little bit clearer. So rather than like stake, I think like the meaning of the Japanese term, if I remember correctly, is kind of like a linchpin. So it's like holding things together is what I got from it. But anyway, I digress.
And the Holy Trinity spiritually. I bring this up out of necessity because this game is multi-layered, which means the characters are as well. So if after today you're saying to yourself, man, it's only part of the story, you'd be correct. But to not overload both myself and the audience, I must approach these videos very compartmentally. I'll break down these concepts in further videos and tie everything together, but for today, and probably for the next few videos, we must go an inch wide and a mile deep on these concepts to get the full picture.
All right, so just for some context, I've been watching a lot more of like Tarnished archaeologist videos off stream to get myself more familiar with their videos, because after the one where I like looked at their Omen video, I got like a lot of like really weird comments. Not really weird comments, but I got a lot of comments that said like I didn't understand because I haven't like watched everything that he put out yet, I guess. So I've been catching up, and one thing that I've noticed in his videos, which I feel has just kind of gotten repeated here, although I don't know if he's gonna like follow through with everything what he just said, is that I find like one flaw of Tarnished archaeologists' approach is that they break up a lot of their content so it doesn't fit into one video. So it makes it a lot harder to follow along or get the full idea or even being able to like criticize certain parts of their thought lines because so much is withheld. So you're not sure if there's like a bigger point or something else that's going to tie into their theories to make them seem more concrete. So that's just kind of like something that this video is just kind of like got me apprehensive about, with the idea that they aren't going to cover everything. And so like probably before like this week, I wouldn't have cared as much, because sometimes that's just the nature of the beast if you're tackling really large topics, which I mean, it looks like it if this is 50 minutes long. But right now, I do feel like he could have used more time editing the script to get rid of a lot of words that are just kind of like filling space, if that makes sense. But of course, that is way easier said than done, and I often find the process of condensing my words is just as long as like actually editing the video, if not, well, it can definitely be longer sometimes, depending on like how much research I'm doing and all that. So anyway, Stella's not sure this game has anything to do with the ego and the id. Defense Post America, kind of. Hey Ponyboy, welcome back. By not explaining, isn't he going a mile wide and an inch deep? Yeah, maybe. We're gonna see how this works out. So this will be a bit of a journey for all of us. Okay, he does a better job of making the point of this video within it alone. Okay. It is said for every LastProtagonist stream you join, a new groove grows in your brain. The Emperor's new groove.
Disclaimer. These are incredibly difficult concepts to comprehend.
All right, yeah. He just gave us a disclaimer, so I'm going to skip that.
Time to paint a clear, fuller picture. Now sit back, grab a pen and a notepad, and enjoy the combined brilliance of Jung, Martin, and Miyazaki. Most of us are familiar with Freud's theory of the human psyche, that which is comprised of the ego, id, and superego. Well, Jung built off of this and went deeper into the human psyche, and by doing so started something known as depth psychology. Jung's theory of the human psyche involved the following key players: the ego, the shadow, the self, the persona, and the anima animus. You will also see the terms consciousness, collective unconsciousness, archetypes, and more within the model of Jung. Those too are important concepts that help us understand the game better, but to understand those, we must first understand the former concepts. In this first video, I'll explain each of these concepts in purely Jungian terms, and then I will show how these concepts tie into the world of Elden Ring by linking them to key players in-game.
All right, see, that was a pretty good summary there, and I almost feel like a lot of the stuff that he just said before, like he could have pretty much just started here at this point, and it would have been fine. Minespatch, welcome back to the stream. Nice to see you again. Yeah, we're going to be watching your video later today. Max Derrat actually introduced you to patches and FromSoft. That's crazy. What a coincidence indeed. Were you the one who suggested I watch Max Derrat's videos? Maybe that's like how it all got linked together.
To begin, let's start with the ego. Jung saw the ego as the center of the field of consciousness, which contains our conscious awareness of existing and a continuing sense of personal identity. It is the organizer of our thoughts and intuitions, feelings and sensations, and has access to memories which are not repressed. What Jung is saying here is that the ego is the decision maker based off our personal opinions and experiences. The best way to describe this is in the following way. When you say to yourself, I am going to go play Elden Ring, the I in that sentence is the ego. It is the you know about, the one above the surface. The you that makes decisions based off of your personal opinions, unrepressed memories, and how you want the world to be. Not necessarily how it is, or how it actually should be. The ego is the sum total of all of our decisions we make in life. From our decision of religion or spirituality, our decision of politics, our decisions of partner, friends, movies, etc. We make these based off how we interact and view the world. The ego is who we identify as. Next, we will cover the persona. The persona is like a mask you attach to the ego. We wear a different mask in different...
Did he just hit his microphone? I'm sorry.
Next, we will cover the persona. The persona is like a mask you attach to the ego. We wear a different mask in different situations in order to get the world and ourselves to view us in a particular light. It acts to shield the ego from negative images. According to Jung, the persona may appear in dreams and take different forms. Over the course of development, children learn that they must behave in certain ways in order to fit in with society's expectations and norms. The persona develops as a social mask to contain all of these primitive urges, impulses, and emotions that are not considered socially acceptable. The persona archetype allows people to adapt to the world around them and fit in with society in which they live. However, becoming too closely identified with this archetype can lead people to lose sight of their true selves. For example, when you go on a first date, you wear the mask of consideration, of patience, of warmth. You try to convince both you and your partner that you are these things. Cut to year 10 of the marriage, and that mask is long gone, and the ego you shows up. We often wear masks to hide who we really are. The ego and persona are the things that make up a person's conscious psyche. They are the things above the surface and what the world sees and interacts with. It is who someone wants to be or how they want the world to be, not necessarily what someone's true reflection is or the reality of the world around them.
Obligatory Shin Megami Tensei persona jokes here with their OSTs and all that, yeah. Oh no, I feel like Freud is well known for just kind of being like the grandfather of psychology, but well refuted since that time. And Necropolis, welcome back to the stream. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, so one of the cooler things to me and kind of more frustrating things to me about Japan when I was first learning about it was the concept of honne and tatemae. And honne is kind of like what he is getting at here with the idea of the ego. It's kind of like your true feelings that you kind of keep to yourself. And tatemae is literally like your standing face. So standing in this sense, like it does literally mean standing, but you could also think of it as like your upstanding reputation. So it's kind of funny to me that it works in a bit of a, what's the word? Cognate kind of way. But anyway, Tate Mai, and like Mai is like standing forward. Wait, am I misremembering that? I'm like having an existential crisis. Tate Mai. No. So it's upstanding and in front. For some reason, I thought the character. No, I don't know. Anyway, I thought face went in there somewhere, but that's men. No, it's definitely Tate Mai. Anyway, so like Tate Mai is your forward-facing face, like the mask that you put on to fit in with society. So one example that always comes to mind when I try to explain like what Honne Tate Mai is to other people is that for anybody who's ever watched Death Note in like the first episode, when the notebook falls from the sky and he reads it and it tells him like he has the power to kill pretty much anybody as long as he knows their name and their face. And so he's doesn't believe it at first, and then like he tries it out on like a thug that's a bad dude, and then once he realizes like the power of the Death Note works, he has a bit of an ethical identity crisis. It's like he's kind of been given godlike powers to an extent, so he's trying to figure out how to use them, and he's trying to justify to himself what actions that he's going to take are the kind of right actions to do. And so he has like a little bit of a flashback, well, pseudo flashback, where the idea of like a teacher, like an ethics teacher or whatever, asking the class, like, is it okay to kill people? And then like some other girl like stands up all rigid and upright, and so she pretty much just like shouts like, no, it's not okay to kill people. And so Light is in his mind's eye justifying things like, yeah, that's just the thing that you tell in front of other people, but everybody else like would totally agree with me that if all of the bad people died, the world would be in a much better place. So that's kind of where I would draw the lines between like Honne. Honne is the girl who tells like the class that it's not okay to kill people, whereas, did I say Honne? That's Tate Mai. Tate Mai is the face that you use in front of others so that way they don't judge you. And Honne is your true innermost feelings that you kind of like leave in the dark. And I feel like that can kind of be a good correlation to this idea of the ego. And well, I don't think he's going to go into like the super ego and stuff, but at the very least, the idea of the persona that he was just talking about here. Existential crisis, same. Light went from college student to murderer within a single day. He was actually a high school student, unless you're like watching one of the weird ass movies. Light was a terrible person to begin with. It's questionable. Like, I mean, there's the whole adage that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and he was kind of given a form of absolute power, and so he may have been corrupted by it. Because, I mean, not to get too lost in the details on an anime that's like, what, 20 years old now? Ooh, maybe not that old. 18 years old? That's not much better. But, when, spoiler alert, when he does kind of blank out his memories temporarily, he does kind of become a goody two-shoes again. So, he's not like all bad. End of spoilers. End of spoilers. Greg says, their issue with analyzing Elden Ring through a very specific lens, color theory, alchemy, psychology, is that From probably drew from a variety of sources instead of one specific one that explains everything. Yeah, I agree with that pretty much completely, and the kind of analogy that I kind of make often to people trying to view FromSoft games through certain lenses is that it almost feels like a bit like the games are a bit of a Rorschach test, where you get a picture of it and you can kind of fill in the blanks to your own liking, depending on how you're looking at it, or like depending on the individual, I guess. Death Note old enough to vote. Stop it.
Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Now, let's cover the aspects of the unconscious brain. Unconsciousness is often referred to as a waterfall, a river, a well, the iceberg below the surface. I want you to keep in mind and think about where in game we find these very things. Again, I will come back to this in a later video, but for now, I want you to make the connection of in-game locations and the concept of unconsciousness within our psyche. Where in game do we go below surface, where it's dark and things are kept hidden? Let's begin exploring the unconsciousness with the shadow. The shadow is all the things you don't like about yourself and often project onto others. The shadow forms out of our attempts to adapt to cultural norms and expectations. It is this archetype that contains all the things that are unacceptable not only to society, but also to one's own personal morals and values. It might include things such as envy, greed, prejudice, hate, and aggression. Jung suggests that the shadow can appear in dreams or visions and take on a variety of forms. It might appear as a snake, a monster, a demon, a dragon, or some other dark, wild, or exotic figure. Often, the darker, more beastly side of ourselves that society would reject, or that our persona and ego would reject, make up the shadow. The shadow lives within our unconsciousness. It resides in the part of our psyche that we repress. It holds the characteristics of ourselves that we don't want to admit, something that we might associate with as a weakness or something undesirable. For example, if someone identifies, that is, their ego and persona, as caring and compassionate, they will repress any aspect of themselves that conflicts with this. In this case, the caring person would repress rage and hatred, and would often project those things onto others. Well, these parts of themselves also go into their shadow and get locked away. Sometimes forever. We all know that one person who tries to be one thing all the time. Someone who is always trying to be happy, or is always trying to act tough. And often, that person seems very emotionally shallow and unbalanced. Well, that person never integrated their shadow selves, and because of that, their lives are often lesser than and lacking something true or whole. The shadow is something that we separate off from ourselves and hide in the deepest recesses of our psyche. The problem being,
I do think it's a little bit ironic that he's showing Godfrey off with this, because like, you might be able to argue that Siraj is a shadow, but like Siraj is keeping him in check. Is he trying to say that he integrates Siraj into himself when he kills it, or the other way around? I don't know, it's kind of funny.
That the longer we hide and repress our shadow, the stronger and darker it becomes, until one day it tips the scales in its favor, becoming the dominant force of our psyche. Jung believed that nested within the unconscious were the anima and animus. The anima and animus are the male and female counterparts of our very soul. For our purposes, we will consider just the animus. When one is born a female at birth, the animus is the male side of her. The animus is the masculine characteristics that are within each female. Jung believed that one's complete soul had both male and female qualities within it, and that often the opposite sex of what one was born is often repressed. The animus within the woman is often depicted as a man she knows intimately. For example, it could be a father, a brother, partner, or how about a son? In today's day and age, these aspects of the opposite sex are becoming more widely accepted by society and thus are not disconnected from the psyche as often. However, in the early 20th century, that wasn't the case. Back then, if a man was born a man, he would repress any feminine qualities about himself, and same with the woman. Luckily, much progress has occurred since Jung's day, but the concept remains all the same. How many of us know that alpha male who would rather die than accept that he's a caring, soft, warm individual? You can see throughout history we are becoming more and more in touch with this aspect of ourselves, and humanity is all the better for it. But it comes with much difficulty. Here is what Jung says about the uniting of the anima and animus. The combined anima and animus is known as the syzygy, or the divine couple. The syzygy represents completion, unification, and wholeness. By now, we are beginning to paint a clear picture of what our conscious ego is and what our unconscious psyche is. Our conscious ego part of our psyche is pretty shallow. It only contains the aspects that we want it to contain, and unfortunately, it is how we present ourselves to the world. On the other hand, the unconscious side of our psyche becomes a prison for all the things we either plucked out or repressed. Things that we simply don't want to be associated with. But both are needed to be a complete, evolved, and enlightened person. If one does not do this, the prisoners will riot and begin to run the show. Have you ever heard the phrase, "You are not the master in your own home"? Well, this is exactly what this is saying. We have all had a moment in our lives that we act out or develop anxieties and think to ourselves, where did that come from? It comes from deep within our unconscious psyche. In that case, you are no longer the master of your own home, and the inmates are running the show. Lastly, and most importantly, we have the self. The self is the culmination of all the concepts we just covered. The self is only revealed to us once we have what Jung calls united the opposites, or completed the process of individuation.
And I feel like a disclaimer is necessary that this stuff is super pseudoscience, so don't take it too seriously, please. I like how the chat is stuck on the word shizgi, whatever it's called. It looks like a super Polish word that I cannot pronounce for the life of me. Necro thinks it's interesting. You remember similar concepts being applied to other Souls games. And yeah, I mean, obviously we're joking around a little bit, but obviously Persona does draw very heavily from these kinds of ideas. So the way that I just kind of approach it, like I said earlier, is kind of similar to the Zodiac and astrology, where it's just kind of a neat idea, but I don't actually think it really governs life to any degree. Oh, you thought everyone was misspelling synergy? No, it was on the screen, but yeah, it's a legitimate term. So Mortis had mentioned that it could be used for the conjunction of planets. So
syzygy.
Syzygy, okay. A conjunction or opposition, especially of the moon with the sun. So an eclipse, or when either lunar eclipse, solar eclipse, that kind of thing, I think. And then a pair of connected or corresponding things. And then it uses a Jung quote right here. Animus and anima represent a supreme pair of opposites, the syzygy. You think the Jungian and astrological systems are attractive to game designers because they're coherent systems and game designers love their systems? Yeah.
It is also who we are as a child. Jung considered that from birth, every individual has an original sense of wholeness, of the self, but that with development, a separate ego consciousness crystallizes out of the original feeling of unity. How many children do you know that have polarizing political opinions, or that repress a part of themselves? None, or should be none. That is because the child's psyche is well balanced.
I feel like that was a really awkward and a bit of a shoehorned analogy or example, a rhetorical question that I would say is just blatantly untrue. Many children struggle with questions of ethics and politics relating to ethics and stuff like that.
They're just being. They aren't trying to be anything. As we grow, we have experiences. These experiences.
And again, children not trying to be anything, I feel like that is also how do I say it? I don't want to say cherry picked because he's not actually picking anything. It's short-sighted. It's very short-sighted because how many parents have you seen try to manipulate their children to properly use the bathroom when they're potty training, or do their chores by saying oh, I thought you were a big girl, I thought you were a big boy. Big kids, they do their chores, they do go to the bathroom on their own, all these kind of things. So children really do want to become other stuff. There's the whole phrase monkey see, monkey do. Kids emulate what they admire, so they definitely want to become the things they admire. It's just, yeah. I mean, he's obviously trying to speak a bit more metaphorically here, but I feel like he should just choose his words and his examples a bit more carefully overall.
Experiences affect the decisions we make. These decisions affect how our ego and persona develop, and over time, we often lose touch with our original sense of self, of wholeness. It is a very cause and effect pattern. Ultimately, the goal of individuation is to get back to that wholeness we had as a child, but with the knowledge we gained. Unfortunately, as we grow, we start to split off from ourselves, making a clear divide of what we want and don't want. That is, we tear off pieces of ourselves that we want to hide. We keep doing that until we have totally lost our connection to our roots. We wake up in a world we don't want to be in. This statue is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. It seems like a man nourishing the Erd tree during its infancy. However, it is much deeper than that. Imagine the crucible as our childlike psyche where the conscious and unconscious parts of ourselves coexist. Then, as we grow, different parts of our personality begin to take shape. But we only nourish the ones that we want and let the other parts of ourselves die. The Erd tree is a representation of our ego and persona. It got us where we are and served us for a while, but things are taking a turn for the worse, and the other parts of ourselves that we buried in the roots are banging at the door.
That's, man, he like almost had it. Like he was really starting off really strong there by comparing the idea of like the personas to the other parts of the crucible that didn't necessarily become the Erd tree. But then the latter portion of it was just like too vague and not informative or tangible enough to like really drive the point home as well as I think he wanted to.
Where we are and served us for a while, but things are taking a turn for the worse, and the other parts of ourselves that we buried in the roots are banging at the door. If we are still rejecting parts of our psyche, one's true self will never be actualized. However, once we accept all the parts of our psyche and reintegrate them into a whole, balanced system, the self flourishes and is, according to Jung, godlike. The self might equally be called the God within us. Another famous depiction of this concept is from Leonardo da Vinci, by way of the famous drawing of the Vitruvian Man. Funny enough, this is how my theory began. When I first started playing the game, there was something familiar about the way Marika looked, outside of the obvious crucifixion, compared to how Radagon looked, with his arms stretched out wide in a T-shape. Then, later in the game, you realize that they are one and the same, but different. I realized if you superimpose their images, you get the Vitruvian Man.
I actually don't really mind that comparison there. That's pretty fair to me.
Vitruvian Man is a famous drawing of Leonardo da Vinci, where he managed to square the circle, the mathematical and mystical question that stumped polymaths for centuries. In simple terms, the Vitruvian Man is someone who is both a circle and a square. The square representing physical qualities and the circle representing the divine qualities like thoughts and...
Oh man, this dude, he didn't watch his video before he uploaded it, and like
physical. Vitruvian Man
square representing
someone who is both a circle and a square. The square representing physical qualities.
Oh wait, what?
And the circle representing...
Okay, no, I just talked over it. Physical qualities, like, and then it just cuts out. So, square is physical.
Square. The square representing physical qualities, like, and the circle representing the divine qualities, like thoughts and intelligence.
Okay. It wasn't as bad as I thought. It's just really distracted me there for a second.
The circle is also associated with feminism, and the square, masculinism. Masculinity. Yeah, he needs like an editor or something. Just somebody else to like look at it to clean his script up a little bit. But I mean, like, this isn't really that bad. It just needs a little bit extra polish, and it would be fine. This is also true in family trees, where the men...
Oh, you're not sure on whether or not the square represents the masculine and the circle the feminine? Yeah, I'm not either, but maybe he justifies it here, other than like the family tree thing, because it does seem like a very bit of a odd transition to go from like Jungian stuff to just like family tree stuff without linking them together a bit more closely. The guys clearly knew we can forgive beginner mistakes. Yeah. Yeah, family trees are kind of arbitrary. Maybe he has more beyond this. I hope so.
Men are represented as squares, the women as circles. When both the circle and square are united, they become godlike. Remember the quote by Jung, the combined anima and animus is known as the syzygy, or the divine couple. Well, syzygy doesn't just apply to anima and animus, it also applies to any opposing qualities that unite, such as matter and mind. If you look at where Marika's arms are, relative to the Vitruvian man, they touch the circle, representing the spirit and feminism, while Radagon's arms touch the square, representing the physical and masculinism. Funny enough...
Okay, I can kind of see where he's going for with that like Vitruvian man analogy there. I mean, I'm not entirely on board with it just because I want like more substantiation of the circle and square claim there, but that was interesting. I'll say that much. You love that the subtitles call America America. Oh man, you should have been in the chat when we were watching some of Smotown stuff. So like the Glomide Queen became the Gourmet Queen. It's pretty rough out there.
The word Numen means divine spirit. So it's very fitting that Marika represents this aspect of the Vitruvian man. We get confirmation of this by their respective source seals. Marika's source seal raises the divine qualities, such as mind, faith, intelligence, and arcane, while Radagon's source seal raises the physical aspects, vigor, endurance, strength, and dexterity. It is clear that these two are parts of...
Okay, this is actually a good, like, tangible example that I wish he used to set that up a little bit earlier, because then I could have been like a lot more on board with this, that like if Radagon represents the physical stuff through this specifically and Marika represents that other stuff, and then he used their poses to kind of like compare to the Vitruvian thing. Well, I do think it's like a very like House of Cards type thing where it doesn't have like the most solid foundations. Like I could at very least really appreciate the kind of metaphor that he's going for with this.
Of a whole balanced being. Before we go any further, I want to look at a few different diagrams that represent the human psyche. Representing the spirit and feminism, while Radagon's arms touch the square.
Okay, I think I hit the space button and muted myself. Fudge. Okay. I don't know how long I was muted, so I'm gonna... Okay. That sucks. Alright, so what I had been saying was, okay, I really wish he started off with this example earlier, because I feel like that gives him a lot more of a basis in what he was trying to claim. Well, I do think what he's talking about overall is a little bit of a House of Cards where it's got structure on a bit of a flimsy foundation. I can appreciate the metaphor for what it is. And so I said, based on the whole idea of Marika representing the mind stuff through her sword and scar seals, and Radagon representing the physical stuff based off of his sword and scar seals, I can kind of get at what he was talking about with the Vitruvian man, specifically with Marika's pose being the top portion of the Vitruvian guy, and that part actually touches the circle, whereas the Radagon stuff, the T-pose touches the square. So that's where I can see he would say like circle equals feminine, square equals masculine, based on these two being combined in one person. Yeah, make sure you get a good scream out before unmuting. Man, I'm such a pro streamer sometimes, guys.
This aspect of the Vitruvian man. We get confirmation of this by their respective source seals. Marika's source seal raises the divine qualities, such as mind, faith, intelligence, and arcane, while Radagon's source seal raises the physical aspects, vigor, endurance, strength, and dexterity. It is clear that these two are parts of a whole balanced being. Before we go any further, I want to look at a few different diagrams that represent the human psyche. First, we have Jung's model, the one we have been referencing throughout this video. Notice how it's one concept with others interacting inside of it. Next, we have
I can barely make out some of these. I think that's supposed to be ego. This is malign. I can't. The resolution's too low, man. Outer world, self, pure aetherus, pure ether. I can't even. Selin.
one concept with others interacting inside of it. Next, we have William Blake's version. Again, interconnected circles representing different aspects of our psyche. Now, let's take a look at the Elden Ring. Very similar. And we know that the Great Runes all have their own unique characteristics.
Yeah, that's just the kind of symbolism that I don't really like. If anything, you could make the claim that the equilateral Elden Ring depiction on like the Fair Missoula relief sculpture, or even on like the Great Road, would probably match with this a lot better if you ignore like the egg-like oval in the middle.
And we know that the Great Runes all have their own.
Hey Rabs Rabble, welcome back to the stream. Yeah, it's okay to be lost. This is some stuff with him talking about Carl Jung and his psychology, and he's trying to impose Jung's methodology onto Elden Ring. And so we're kind of like giving him a lot of crap in the chat, which, I mean, a lot of us aren't super big fans of Jung, which is a little bit rough, I suppose, but that's kind of the part of the growth in a channel and meeting people who aren't as enthusiastic about your ideas, perhaps. Yeah, Jungian is a move. You once spent a solid 45 minutes muted in Pathfinder, revealing important characters and everything? Oh, man, that sucks. Hey, Jube, thanks for... Oh, yeah, I meant to say hello to you earlier, but I forgot. Also, thanks for becoming a lore hunter. I appreciate that. Welcome to the channel membership stuff. Enjoy the little silly badge and our very limited emotes. Which, yeah. Oh, yeah, I do have Pepe Ofnir. This is a perfect emote for this video. All right. Going back to the video now.
Own unique characteristics, kind of like different parts of one's personality or psyche. That's right. The Elden Ring is the representation of Marika's, and collectively, humanity's, psyche. I'll give more details as the video goes on, but it fits beautifully with the narrative of the game, the different representations of the human psyche, and the different great... We have covered personal consciousness and unconsciousness.
Man, that's... He really just needs a better eye for detail at this point. Like, just watch your thing before you upload it, and hopefully fill out some of those mistakes. There's some, like, a lot of little, like, audio stuff that he could fix, which I kind of forgive because I'm assuming this is, like, a very new channel, or maybe, like, one of his first videos. Hold on, let me do this.
Is the representation
5 months ago, 4 months ago. I'm just curious. Oh wait, can we see in the about how old this is? Join. Yeah, that doesn't tell us when he actually uploaded. Should have known better. Okay, so it was literally his first video, which is what I expect. So I hope he got better. I mean, I assume so.
well by now, but Jung didn't stop there. He believed that everyone also contained a collective version of these. The collective consciousness you can think of as the zeitgeist, the defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history as shown by the ideas and beliefs of the time. This is often associated with things like wars, political structures, religious structures, regimes, etc. On the other hand, collective unconscious is a term introduced by Jung to represent a form of the unconscious, that part of the mind containing memories and impulses of which the individual is not aware, common to mankind as a whole, and originating in the inherited structure of the brain. It is distinct from the personal unconscious, which arises from the experience of the individual. According to Jung, the collective unconscious...
Like, I don't know if it's YouTube messing up or it's literally the video, but I mean, I'm pretty confident it's the video. It's just very distracting.
Experience of the individual. According to Jung,
the little noise in between it. All right. Jube says you really like that he does a Jungian reading of the text, but for you remember that was a very early AP English intro to analysis reading of things. Yeah, I mean, Jung is obviously very early on in the study of psychology, and so he had some very influential ideas for a very long time, but he also had like a lot of well-known detractors, and despite all that, a lot of his work does resonate with many people, which is why it's kind of held a zeitgeist for so long, if we want to borrow the terminology of the video. I was going to say something else. Oh yeah, it's a little bit of a protag lore here. So the first time I got introduced to the idea of the collective unconsciousness, I think I was like 11 or 12 on the internet, and I used to play this game called Archmage, which is kind of really hard to describe. Actually, I wonder if I could like Google it. And so this is back in the time of dial-up internet, and okay, yeah, we're not going to find like anything specific. Anyway, Archmage is this game where it's kind of like Clash of Clans, but it's more or less all text-based, and it was very, very rough, and you could like invade other people's kingdoms and fight them with like a bunch of like mythological creatures like Pegasi, wizards, skeletons, leeches, vampires, all that kind of stuff. So I really loved that game as a child in those, very rough dial-up internet days. And there was like a sequel game to it called Arcspace, and in that game they had like it kind of like Civilization, where you wanted like research goals to like keep going out and exploring and finding other planets, and from those planets you would get resources and stuff. And so like one of the goals was to unlock the collective unconscious, and that's kind of where I got that idea from. And there are like a bunch of different races there. I'm trying to like look in the directory of games. Let's see. Nope, that's not going to be it. I mean, it was still mostly based off of like text. Oh wait, this kind of looks like it. If this weird thing loads. Oh no, that's different. Dang. Web Space Alliance. Magellan Wars. Oh yeah, I think it might have gotten changed names later on. Because I mean, these things like lasted a couple years and then they're like rebranded, or they got their ideas stolen. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it got renamed called Magellan Wars. Or not, I don't know. Okay.
Hello everyone, my name's Xenoterror. Some of you might know me already, but
Intro.
we're
Races.
for you to understand.
Okay, so Magellopedia. I don't know if this website's still active. So yeah, they had like a bunch of like different races. One were like kind of like the Hive, if you're familiar with those. There were also like some robot people, which are kind of like Zenyatta from like Overwatch, where they're just kind of like super psychic beings and stuff like that. So Jincho Tenno. Huh. Anyway, Zesperados, Zerusian. Okay, no, so these were the races, yeah. Human, Targoid, Buccaneers. Oh, yeah, man, I'm going down memory lane live with you guys. Zesperados, Zerusians. I think I'd like to play the Zerusians. And the Zelos, those are like the bug type things. I think Agarus, whatever they were like planetary beings. It was a very interesting game to like a preteen back in those days when we were in the wild, wild west of the internet. Yeah. Cain was the first vampire, and you can't convince you otherwise. You remember Pokemon too? Yeah, kind of like that. Reminds you of some text-based game your older brother showed you when you were a kid. It had undead and he controlled armies or something. That could have been Archmage. Is that like 40k factions light? Kind of, for the most part. Or like, StarCraft before StarCraft was even a thing. So yeah, not to derail too far, but yeah, let's hop back in.
Jung, the collective unconscious contains archetypes, or universal primordial images and ideas. I'll expand on this concept in a later video as they deserve their own time in the light. Because this game is multi-layered, where some characters can represent both the personal aspect and a collective aspect, I need to quickly address this in this video. Here's a quick example to give you an idea of what this concept is conveying until we can further expand on it. The Pope has personal aspects of his psyche that will affect the way the Catholic faith is expressed and viewed during his tenure. However, he also has collective aspects of the entire things that he might not have had a direct hand in, but has guided him to becoming the leader of this faith. That Pope will have his own personal shadow, while the entire Catholic faith will have a gigantic collective shadow. Unfortunately for that Pope, while he is the leader, he must face both of those burdens. This is a very broad and crude way of putting it, but it gives you an idea of what Jung is saying. Jung also believed that within the collective unconscious, there were things called archetypes. These archetypes are common personas that we all wear from time to time. For example, we have all embodied the archetype of the rebel. At some point in our lives, probably in our teenage years, we fight against authority, go against the grain, and fight for independence. Jung believes that these archetypes go across time and cultures as far back as the rise of humanity. It is not something that we are taught or learned, but something that lives deep within us and that we have access to. I will cover this concept in another video where I look at the demigods and how they are archetypes within Marika's psyche.
Yeah, I think that was just set up extremely poorly for trying to have an audience who may not know what like the Jungian archetypes are. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull up a quick Google search, which will probably give us, Wikipedia. And so let's go ahead and maximize this stuff and zoom on in. Does it have it listed? Examples. Holy crap, why is this archetypal psychology? It's not quite it. Let's go back. Okay, 12 Jungian archetypes. So I don't know if this like actually has all of the things. I don't know like if this is just somebody else's take on what Jungian psychology was, but I digress. So we have the ideas of the artist, the innocent, the sage, the explorer, the outlaw, magician, hero, lover, jester, everyman, caregiver, and ruler. And so they have some associated, like, I don't want to say like emotions, but like, sure, emotions that go along with it. So innocent is safety, sage knowledge, explorer values freedom, the outlaw values liberation. I don't exactly know the difference between freedom and liberation. Maybe because they're already feeling oppressed and they want to be freed. I guess that can make sense. Magician values power, whereas like the ruler wants control. And so within these archetypes, there's like a core aspect to them. So outlaws, magicians, and heroes want to leave a mark. Lovers, jesters, and everymen connect to others. Caregivers, rulers, artists provide structure. And innocents, sages, and explorers are like more like journeyers, I guess, or like more in tune with their spirit, according to this. So like I said, I don't know how accurate this is, so take it with a hefty grain of salt, and hopefully that gives you a bit of a better perspective of what the centered Tarnished was talking about. And yeah, I guess I'll go into like a little bit more detail because I don't know if he's going to elaborate more, and I might just like start skipping around on the video a bit. In that, like, within each person, we're all supposed to have aspects of these quote-unquote archetypes within us, and what kind of manifests depends on your upbringing and your ego and all that kind of stuff that he was talking about earlier in the video. So some people are more predisposed to certain dispositions. So, for example, Jung would probably argue that women are more nurturing, so they're probably more likely to be caregivers and stuff like that, and tie into having a stronger anima, whereas like men would have the animus, but that doesn't mean like men can't be caregivers, because there's like still like the whole father idea that goes along with this stuff, and like fathers can be both caregivers and kind of rulers. So it's multifaceted, and these are just supposed to be like some of the biggest defining traits of all humanity, according to Jung. And then, of course, this does get expanded upon further and further based on like your psychologist or philosopher or author of choice, really. And you can even see like a lot of signs of like Jungian psychology and things like Myers-Briggs for a more modern pseudoscience equivalent. Yeah, so many types, such arc. Wow. Ponyboy would say freedom is existing without care, and liberation is more like catharsis from taking the reins away from your oppressor. Okay, that's kind of what I thought. It just took me a second. You usually see Jung stuff as a writer's guide to basic character creation. And yeah, that's kind of how he's typically treated nowadays. So it's a little bit different to see it like kind of argued. So I don't want to say like matter of factly, but like seriously, sincerely, maybe in this kind of format. You wasted too much time grinding your obsessive compulsive skill tree. Feels bad, man.
For now, let's turn our attention to the concept of the collective shadow.
Wow.
Within the human psyche, there is a collective shadow. The collective shadow is the humanity's dark side. It is the sum total of past and present atrocities, cruelties, tragedies, and horrors perpetrated by mankind and stored at a deep, unconscious, cellular level. These are things we have done as a human race that we don't want to face or admit and hide away. Things like genocide, persecution, concentration camps, slavery, etc. These are things that we hold within our collective shadow, and just like in the personal shadow, sooner or later we must face these things, or they'll come back up and bite us while we're not looking. You could make the argument that this is already happening. Just look out in the world or turn on the news and watch the riots, the brutality, the hatred, and injustice that is. This is our collective shadow spilling into our collective reality. At this point, I'm sure.
So Jupe says Jungian psychology is really just as universally applicable as Joseph Campbell. Well, obviously, like Joseph Campbell was inspired by Jung, which is where he got like his archetypes and his inspiration for like the hero with 1,000 faces, which I know like a lot of people have issues with. I kind of treat it similarly to Jung, where I think it is like reductive to say the traits of all humans can be kind of like boiled down to a certain set of characteristics and a kind of like shared sub-language or whatever you want to call it, just like certain archetypes that kind of get manifested in every culture. Nonetheless, I still do think it's a compelling thought line, which kind of has a little bit of validity to it, because people are people everywhere, and it's just kind of like a difference of ornamentation, if that makes sense. And so I like a lot of what Joseph Campbell has to say. It's very thought-provoking, even if I don't necessarily like agree with it, or even if it can be a little bit too reductive in kind of ignoring the individual aspects of people and cultures and races as opposed to something else. But that, like, he wasn't ever like really disrespectful. It's just like the lens that he was using was a very macro oriented lens, which a lot of people think makes a lot of stuff get lost in translation and loses out on some of the finer details, which they're right, but I mean, it's just kind of the nature of using a wide focus lens versus a narrow one. All right.
Sure, many of you are connecting the dots for yourselves. Dots that have hopefully become clearer and closer together. Let's connect these dots together.
That's really funny.
This entire game is a psychoanalysis of the human race and how our consciousness, that is, our ego and personas, led to division and fractures throughout both the inner world and outer world. Where have we heard that phrase before? An interesting thing to note is that consciousness is often analogous to will. That is,
so it's like the second time where he's made like a leading question but not followed up with it, which is fine if you're able to infer the thing that he's implying, but I guess it can be kind of questionable. Like in my mind, and I'm kind of actually, chat, what did you think his question was about? Like, where have we heard that before with the whole idea about like the division and the fractures in both the inner and outer world?
Where have we heard that phrase before?
Like, obviously he's leading, and I'm pretty sure most people are going to be on the same page with this one. But if somebody hasn't played through Elden Ring enough to get the reference that he's pointing to, it's going to be a little bit flat. Oh, you have no idea? Yeah, Frenzy Flame is what I would have said with Aston X. Okay. Yeah, assume he's talking about Hayata, you only hear piano. Hey, Eamon, welcome back to the stream.
An interesting thing to note is that consciousness is often analogous to will. That is to say, we use willpower to make decisions and go through life. Every time you act out a thought, you are using your will to do so. You could say that our collective version of this might be something called the greater will. For the rest of today's video, I want to show how these Jungian concepts apply to Queen Marika and how they answer the more mysterious questions of what is happening inside Elden Ring. I'll be focusing just on the personal aspects of these concepts for today, and we'll turn to the collective side in a later video. But keep in mind that Marika represents many things, such as Christ, humanity, Mother Earth, etc. Who is Queen Marika? Which aspects of her personality has she groomed and nourished? Which parts of herself has she locked away? What are her prime objectives? Let's take a look within the psyche of Queen Marika using Carl Jung as our guiding light. What does Marika want the world to see? Well, we can answer that by looking around the world at the various statues. She is a mother, a warrior, a queen, life giver, blessing giver. These are all the things that make up her conscious psyche, her ego and persona. Jung had a name for someone with these qualities, the Great Mother. The Great Mother is an archetype of Jung and has the qualities of life giver, queen, Mother Earth, etc. But like all mothers, she also has a dark side. This archetype is often referred to as the loving and terrible mother. On one hand, she is the creator of life, and on the other, the destroyer of it. Jungian psychologist Erich Neumann wrote the book The Great Mother, an analysis of the archetype. Fitting that Marika is of Neumann race and represents the Great Mother. In this book, Neumann says, "But for every positive creative force, there must be an opposing destructive one. This notion is doubly true in the esoteric world of Carl Jung, where all archetypes must, by necessity, possess a shadow self. The dark twin sister of the Great Mother is the Terrible Mother, a force of death and destruction. This archetype inhabits the world of primordial instincts and is frequently represented as subhuman or even animal-like in form." Another thing that Jung said about the ego is that it should be small and hard, like a stone, Marika's appearance in the Erd Tree has always perplexed me until I heard Young explain this. It's yet another confirmation that the game is indeed heavily influenced on Young's research, and that Queen Marika represents the ego.
I feel like that is definitely a bit of a stretch, because you could make the argument that like Crystallians are super ego then, or like all of the golems represent ego. But yeah, I feel like they're just trying to put too much on America to the point where it kind of becomes, you could say anything about her. Like I said before, not in this stream, but just in general, like Marika is very much like the Velka of this game, with the added benefit of you can see her. Velka is pretty much everyone in this game, though. Like Ronnie's Velka, Melena's Velka, Marika's Velka. They just kind of fit wherever you need them to, and they're ubiquitous. Yeah, and Boris, nice to see you again. The Velka pain, yeah.
At this point, we can figure out what Marika's shadow is. Death, and the destruction of her creations. And what is plucked from the Elden Ring, which I said is the representation of Marika's psyche? Destined death, also known as the Rune of Death. That's right. Based off of everything we learned so far, Marika and the Glomite Queen are one and the same. Marika is the ego, and the Glomite Queen is the shadow.
I mean, that's a funny way to like come to that conclusion, and obviously that's an extremely contentious conclusion within the lore community at large. I do think there is room for that to be a possibility, but I wouldn't ever say it so definitively, even just like based on the whole Jungian stuff. And at the very least, like if you want to say that Marika is like the Glomite Queen, you might want to like there's a lot of ways that could work, and you could like build into the whole potential of the Glomite Queen being Marika's shadow. Like he said that like a moment ago, but not just in this instance right here exactly. And so Radagon could also be Marika's shadow, but when we use that kind of terminology in relation to Elden Ring, it really muddies the waters, because Malekith is literally called her shadow. So like they're Jungian shadows? I don't know. Yeah, I'm just gonna back it up a bit so I could say that wonderful conclusion again.
Everything we learned so far, Marika and the Glomite Queen are one and the same. Marika is the ego, and the Glomite Queen is the shadow. Now, I'm sure many of you are screaming at me saying, dude, she literally has a shadow in game. Malekith, you know, the big black beast? Yep, you are correct. But remember, the shadow holds those characteristics about ourselves we don't like. The shadow is like a safe where we keep things hidden away that we don't want. The things inside that safe are a real shadow, not necessarily the safe. In Jungian terms, the shadow is often described as dark, beastly, terrifying, which is why in-game the shadows have the same appearance. However, what the shadow holds within themselves is different from person to person. For example, Blythe and Malekith have the same features but act totally different. Blythe is friendly and loyal, aspects of Ronnie she hates about herself, and thus puts into her shadow. Malekith is terrifying and holds the power of death, aspects of Marika that she hates about herself. So yes, Malekith is indeed Marika's shadow, but the qualities within him are what Marika is actually repressing. For our purposes, you can think of Malekith and Destined Death as one and the same.
Except for that line there, I was going to say I don't really mind these comparisons, but obviously that's really contingent upon whether or not you accept the premises to begin with.
To defeat Malekith, Destined Death is released back into the world, and more importantly, back into the psyche of Marika, making her one step closer to a whole divine being. Let's unpack that a little further. We know that Malekith defeated the Glomite Queen, and that Marika ordered him to seal Destined Death away. There are two ways to think about this. One is that Malekith saw his Empyrean disobeying the Two Fingers by embodying the Glomite Queen, and thus defeated her. The other is that Marika hated this part of herself so much that she asked her half-brother to kill that part of her and lock it away forever. Think about it like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
I mean, I do think it can be a bit more complicated than that, but I think for the purposes of his examples, you could just kind of, suspend the disbelief and go with it to an extent. But to just give a little bit more insight into their relationship, because Mortis does seem a little bit confused. I was laughing at the Dr. Jackal thing, not Mortis. If you had Marika and you believed her to be a full-on being, and if the two fingers kind of made her shadow identity into a legitimate physical and tangible thing, if you took Marika's Psyche's shadow, that could be what Malekith represents. And so, since Marika is the kind of goddess of bounty and fertility, the opposite of bounty and fertility would be like terror and death. And that's kind of what our centered Tarnished friend is trying to argue what Malekith represents of Marika's actual character. Of course, textually, that raises a lot of issues because the Glowmide Queen is actually treated as a character that's completely different from Malekith. But if you are still basing your ideas on the perspective that the Glowmide Queen is Marika, Malekith and the Glowmide Queen are just a part of her that got sealed away into her like literal shadow because of the two fingers and whatnot. So, sorry I didn't articulate that as well as I would have liked, but there is a kind of sense to it, even if you don't think or like don't agree with like his little premises right here specifically.
Marika couldn't stand embodying death and thus searched for ways to lock that part of her away. Either way, if the theory holds true, then the Glowmide Queen is the dark twin sister of Queen Marika, the great and terrifying mother, as told to us by Newman. This is also saying that Melina is another projection of Marika, which is actually incredibly fitting. Again, each of these characters deserves their own video, so I won't go into a ton of detail now, but the duality of Melina is the physical representation of Marika and the Glowmide Queen. Melina is Marika, well, a projection of her. This explains the incredible powers and incantations that Melina has. It explains how she can orate the echoes of Marika. It also explains why she is doing what she is doing, and that she can transform into the Glowmide Queen. This statue has stumped the community for a long time. Some thinks it's Godwin, others, some think it's an unknown Empyrean that has 3 shadows or something. But now, we have a much better understanding of the game, what it is trying to tell us. This statue, like the rest of the game, represents many things. It represents Marika splitting her qualities into the ones she likes and doesn't, thus creating her shadow. It represents humanity gaining enlightenment and leaving their beastly selves behind. It also represents a spiritual split from following the practice of animism towards a more structured religion.
All right, and just to be clear, I'm not a fan of that kind of language that's used a bit definitively to say that the statue does represent these things. And I prefer the more grounded approach of saying, like, this could represent this, it could represent that, perhaps this, etc. Just because it gives players or others more room to come to their own conclusions and disagree with my premises if... Hold on, let me rephrase this. So if I use that kind of language and I use it definitively, but somebody disagrees with my premises, then they don't really have as much of a reason to continue to listen to me because they've already disagreed, you know? And so if you disagreed with any of the things that he said right here, why would you be inclined to believe him if he's going to build on those points, you know? But if it is phrased as conjecture, you can just probably set it aside and go with the flow and suspend your own disbelief a little bit more easily, perhaps. You remember when you forced a Jung lens onto your 8th grade papers to sound deep? Vague and plenty of coincidental talking points for any subject. Yeah, definitely.
More on these in a later video, but let's focus on it symbolizing Marika splitting herself and making her shadow. Why is it that Malekith is here? Why is this his boss room? Well, because this is where he was born. This is the very point in time where Marika made the decision to repress certain things about herself that she didn't enjoy, and thus created Malekith, her shadow. Why is it the fair Missoula is stuck in time? Yes, Placidusax has that power, but what does it mean on a deeper level?
So like I was just saying a moment ago, when he said the claim that like this is where Marika decided to like repress those aspects of her character, you could make the counter argument that her shadow-bound beast was given to her by the Two Fingers, and if that is true, that would sound like it should invalidate what he's saying here. It might not directly, based on how he tries to argue this point, but when it's said so definitively, and there are those kinds of like legitimate questions about these claims, it just kind of really detracts from the presentation overall. And of course, like this isn't like an issue that's like specific to him. This is just kind of why I harp on the use of language the way that I do for a lot of the videos that I watch. And of course, my own videos to a large extent. Wait, who left? Bohi is not? Oh, okay. I totally misread what you said.
Her shadow. Why is it the fair Missoula is stuck in time? Yes, Placidusax has that power, but what does it mean on a deeper level? What else can you think of?
Plastics Deus Ex. That was amazing. Plastic Deus Ex.
Power, but what does it mean on a deeper level? What else can you think of that is suspended in time? Something that you can go back and visit, but fades and crumbles as time goes on. How about a memory? This is Marika's memory of her splitting off from her shadow.
And again, I feel like that kind of claim can be directly contradicted with how we can see Fair Missoula at the isolated Divine Tower. But to be fair, that literally is the only other place we can see Fair Missoula from. So maybe it is supposed to be more, maybe, or like less physical, I guess. I don't know.
Over time, the other elements have crumbled, leaving the physical place in ruins. But the statue remains in perfect condition. To take it one step further, what part of the human experience is shown throughout our entire lives? Our childhood. Our childhood experiences shape every decision we make throughout our lives, and this is why Fair Missoula has pieces of it everywhere in the lands between. It is Marika's childhood sprinkled in her consciousness. Pretty cool of the developers to show it in this way, and even cooler now that we have an understanding of it. It's important to note.
And again, like this statue of this girl, even though she's much smaller than the wolves are just kind of gigantic, she doesn't really give a childlike appearance, which I think further destabilizes his claims.
That one shadow is created as soon as we start repressing certain aspects of ourselves. This means that Malekith wasn't created when Marika removed Destined Death, but rather much earlier on in her life. It wasn't until Marika came into power and the Erdtree was flourishing that she removed the Rune of Death. Remember what Jung said about repressing one shadow? That the longer one represses it, the darker and bigger it grows? Compare the size of Malekith to Blythe. This shows that Marika has been hiding this away for a very long time. By avoiding her shadow, Malekith grew bigger and more powerful in the dark until she could no longer defeat him.
Of course, you might be able to make the argument that Deathroot has distorted him over the years, but it's its own contentious claim there. Bella had asked, was it ever explained in game why Fair Missoula is floating? The answer is no. There might be some incidental explanation through the Ruins Greatsword in which it says like it got struck by a meteorite which imbued it with the power of gravity. And so you might be able to extrapolate from that if the Ruins Greatsword fell from Fair Missoula, and Fair Missoula is in the sky, and the Greatsword was imbued with the power of gravity and floats, or like whatever, then perhaps Fair Missoula also was given a floating power by nature of being struck by that meteorite that also caused the Ruins Greatsword to fall. But there is a bit of ambiguity about the Ruins Greatsword. Like, it could make it sound as though Fair Missoula was already in the sky when it got hit by a meteorite, or it could have been on the ground, so have fun with that.
Reintegrate him and Destined Death back into herself. This is where the Tarnished, Roundtable Hold, and Hugh come to existence. More on this later, as I want to stay focused on Marika and the Golden Order for today. I'm sure many of you are putting that together on your own, but stick with me here. Another interesting point about Fair Missoula is that the sun never sets. This is because this is where Marika's shadow lives, and you must have constant sunlight in order to have a shadow. Yet another incredible detail the developers put into the game. At this point, we have a pretty good idea of what Marika's...
I don't necessarily disagree that you have to have sunlight to have shadow. I feel like it might have been a bit better to establish that shadow is contingent on having an object. And so, like, darkness is different than shadow because it doesn't need an object to exist, if that makes sense. Oh, and as Greg says, if it's frozen in time, it could be perpetually in a falling apart state, which is a pretty fair assessment, perhaps. Any light can cast a shadow? Not necessarily. You would need an object to juxtapose it against the light. Like, light is just light until it hits something. Sort of. I mean, of course, like, you have, like, the whole wavelengths, and if you want to get into, like, the super, like, metaphysics aspects of it, yeah, you could argue many things about it, but just,
His conscious psyche is all about. Life, creation, nurturing, etc. We also know the aspects of herself she removed and stuck into her shadow. Destined Death. The destruction of her creations and of life. One thing that needs to be mentioned is how Marika and the Erdtree came to power. It's clear that Marika defeated all the other factions in order to rule, not very caring and nurturing. But recall what Newman said about the Great Mother. She is great and terrifying. It wasn't until after she established her rule that she removed Destined Death. In doing so, Marika created the Golden Order and broke the natural cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Over time...
And of course, I mean, not to, like, criticize him too strongly here, like, the timeline of events is really wishy-washy, and there is a lot of contention about when Godfrey finished subjugating the lands between, because there is the whole weird stuff of Radagon going to Liurnia while Godfrey should still technically be around. So, yeah, I'll just leave that alone for now.
Time that unbalanced turns the world into ruin. Let's move on to Marika's animus. Remember, the animus is the masculine characteristics in the female psyche. It is often attributed to characteristics such as rationality, unemotional, strength, etc. And it often takes the physical form of a male that is very close to the female. A father, a brother, in our case, a son. It didn't take long for the community to notice that Radagon and Godwyn look eerily similar. The only real difference being that Radagon has red hair. More on this later. They even wear the same clothing. It's clear that Marika's animus is taking the physical form of Godwyn, but remember, this game is both on a personal and collective level, so Radagon actually takes on a few different concepts, but for today, let's stay focused on the personal animus of Marika.
So that's a very spicy take. I like it for just how spicy it is, and I'm sure like the chat is going to be frothing at the mouths to varying degrees. So I do think it's important that he is trying to differentiate Malekith as the Shadow and Radagon as the Animus, which is a little bit unintuitive because he's trying to argue that they're both aspects of Marika, which is kind of true to an extent, depending on like how much you want to believe that Malekith is literally part of her. Which, I mean, to be fair, Blythe says that he is part of Ronnie, so maybe there is more to that statement in general. And then More Lord Than There Seems said, they have a theory on how Malekith can die in Fair Missoula and be in the Bestial Sanctum. It's because he's the Shadowbound Beast, and it's similar to how you kill Blythe just after Radahn. What harm can be done to a Shadow? So you can kill Blythe before Radahn, and it'll be the same effect. So yeah, the only issue that I have with Malekith's wonky deaths is that we don't ever really kill Marika's two fingers. So does he ever die? Like properly? Like why doesn't he just come back? Like why can't we just keep fighting Malekith over and over? Of course, like it might be an issue of like destined death actually being part of him, but if that's the issue, why does he still spawn in the Bestial Sanctum? Maybe there's some time shenanigans going on, but even if there are, it doesn't help that Malekith / Gurink can recognize the Tarnished when they first meet in Fair Missoula. Shadows are immortal until the connection to their Empyrean is severed. So either way, like he's still effectively mortal, while Marika is sort of technically alive, or at the very least, like Radagon. She's not completely dead. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe she is. Anyway, let's go back to the video.
Let's look deeper into Radagon and get a better picture of how he fits into the role of Marika's Animus. First, let's look at what Radagon does that is explained to us in-game. He is the head of the Golden Order's army, which indicates he has incredible battle prowess and strength. Next, he marries the enemy and ends the Liurnian War, saving countless lives and strengthening both houses, perhaps even neutralizing Rennala, but that still needs more examination. Either way, these are very rational diplomatic moves. He also studies sorceries and incantations to be whole, which indicates he has felt less than whole for his entire life, like he is missing a part of himself. Lastly, he goes to the capital, and next thing you know, Marika and Radagon are one being. Obviously, he had a much fuller and deeper life within Elden Ring, such as the connection to his children, but again, for today, let's stay focused on these concepts. I promise to address them in later videos. This would also explain how a mere champion came to be Elden Lord. Recall this quote by Jung: "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Radagon's symbol is the Web of Wyrd. The Web of Wyrd depicts the connection of the fates. This is a complex, interwoven symbol that is representative of the complexities of the fates. It is a representation of the past, present, and future. For the Vikings, the Web of Wyrd was the reminder that the deeds not only affect the present, but the future as well. Radagon is Jung's quote come to life. He is the living, breathing fate of Marika's actions. He is the totality of all her past actions and becomes a leal hound of the Golden Order. The Web of Wyrd also implies the cause and effect of one's lifelong decisions, and thus, the law of causality is born. We are stepping a bit into the territory of collective unconsciousness, so I'll leave it at that for now. Back to the personal animus of Marika. It's clear that through his actions, Radagon displays those iconic masculine qualities. He takes on the form of Godwyn and becomes one with Marika. Remember this quote by Jung: "The combined anima and animus is known as the syzygy, or the divine couple."
But yeah, and now that he brought it up again, I was just gonna kind of leave it alone, but Eamon also said, "You don't think we really know enough about Godwyn's appearance outside of like the one cutscene to know that Radagon looks like him?" And I kind of agree with that. I mean, there might be a bit of a passing resemblance because they're kind of related, but I wouldn't necessarily agree that Radagon looks like Godwyn. So, moving on.
represents the completion, unification, and wholeness. By the time we enter the game, this reunion has already taken place, and note the color of the Erd Tree, yellow or gold. This will be important in an upcoming video where I connect Jung's theory of individuation to alchemy and what we see in game. Finally, we have the self, culmination of all the different aspects of one's psyche. The self is the very center of one's being, the very beginning, but in order for it to be actualized, it has to be integrated with all the other parts of one's personality. Once the psyche can hold in balance the ego, persona, the shadow, the anima and animus, the self is actualized and is, as Jung puts it, godlike. The Elden Beast is Marika's self. Not until Marika's shadow and animus are incorporated back into her psyche does the Elden Beast show itself. Now you're all saying, the Elden Beast was the first thing to come to lands between and gave life. How are you saying this? But remember, the self is also the very beginning of one's psyche. And as one goes through life, we cut off certain parts of our psyche. And not until we put them back together can we get back to our true self. Elden Beast is the true form of the Elden Ring. It is said that long ago, the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. This first quote is telling us that the Elden Beast is the true form of Marika, as Marika and the Elden Ring are synonymous. So, if the Elden Beast equals the Elden Ring, and the Elden Ring equals Marika's psyche, then it holds that the Elden Beast is Marika's whole united psyche. It does not say in game, but I'm sure that the Elden Beast went through different forms before the one we see in game. Just like the Elden Ring changed throughout the life of Marika, it must be true that the Elden Beast did as well.
No, I mean, I was definitely muted because I'll often just drink water or clear my throat or talk to the dogs or something while videos are playing. But yeah, going into the whole sentence there, thanks for quoting it. Crow's taking off. Welcome back to the stream. You said you think the comparison to Godwin is also related to the cracks in Radigan's back in the trailer? The fact that Radigan statues and the churches have blonde hair, etc. Yeah, I could potentially see that, but I mean, those cracks also appear on Marika as a byproduct of the shattering. I mean, of course, Radigan is Marika and all that, but at least Marika is blonde. And I would disagree with the Radigan statues having blonde hair in the churches. I would say they aren't colored at all because they're just statues. But yeah, let's go ahead and pull up a screenshot. Or maybe even a clip. Pretty sure. Oh yeah, we can just do this one. I guess this one isn't technically in a church, but I mean, it's not like he's blonde. Part of it is just the lighting. I wouldn't say this is any different from this. Let's see if I have something better. So he's gone there. Let me... At the very least, in his paintings, he's always depicted as being red of hair. And I think it's an iconic part of his character that he is red-haired because he's said to have despised his locks. So I would hard disagree about him being blonde in any capacity. Radigan is Marika? Yes, it's actually more like Marika is Radigan in the Japanese. Let's go ahead and move on.
The second item description tells us the origins of the Elden Beast, that it came via a golden star from the Greater Will. Throughout history, in various mythos, enlightenment, consciousness, birth, are all symbolized by a bright light. It's analogous to the phrase, someone turn on the lights, when describing someone's consciousness. It's also analogous to the symbol of a light bulb above someone's head when they have an idea. Light is often symbolic of consciousness, This description is telling us that the Elden Beast is the birth of Marika's psyche, maybe even the very birth of Marika herself. We have also established that the greater will is analogous to humanity's will, or the human spirit. That means, once humanity gained enlightenment and consciousness, the golden star, aka the Elden Beast, was the symbol of that.
And again, like, a lot of that stuff is very contentious, especially in relation to the idea of godhood being tied to being the vessel for the Elden Ring, and the potential that Placidusax could have had a different god than Marika. For what it's worth, and to just like throw a little bit of oil on the fire here, it could have been possible that Marika could have been Placidusax's god, and then she left him. So enjoy that thought there. Rabs believed they mentioned in a previous stream that Black Sun by Stanton Marlin is a better version of that Jungian alchemy book. You haven't read it, but Quelaag mentioned it once, so it's good enough for you. Okay. Turbert123, welcome in. Light also starts with the letter L, so does Limgrave. Thoughts? Actually, now that you mentioned Limgrave, in 1.0, the domain of Tenebrae talked about Radagon not wanting the Tarnished to come back or something like that. So yeah, you're onto something there. Could the Elden Beast somehow be to Radagon as Sirash is to Godfrey? Both Empyreans and Elden Lords have a beast paired to them. I would like that a bit more if maybe the Tarnished gained a Shadowhound beast or something like Sirash at the end of our thing. But I see what you're going for with that there. But I do think it's meant to be clear that the Elden Beast might predate Radagon, although you could make the argument that the Elden Ring became the beast, and yeah, it's just, brilliantly vague as always in a FromSoft game.
Humanity, through its natural processes, gained intelligence and consciousness, and that was the birth of the concept of order. We know from the Elden Beast remembrance that it is the incarnation of the concept of order. It's easier to think of it through a Christian lens, which we will in an upcoming video.
Beans and Rice said our beast is Torrent. That's kind of a good analogy, but at the very least we don't have his goat face coming out of our back like Godfrey.
Today we must stay on track. Consciousness only wants to make things make sense, and thus order is established. Order works well until certain groups feel they are the highest of order and gain supremacy. Once order becomes chaos, humanity is lost. Here's an example, albeit a very... Leaders like Hitler and Stalin strived for order, so much so that it led to some of the world's worst acts in history. Those within those regimes completely lost their humanity and their willpower to stand against that horrific party. This is also why communication with the greater will has been lost. We have completely lost our humanity and spirit along the path of order. It's not that the greater will is this outside God that is manipulating us, but that the actions we have been taking are no longer making sense.
I feel like that is also a bit... he could be referencing the demigods, but at least from Aeneas and the Two Fingers in the Round Table Hold, they say they welcomed back the Tarnished because they threw away the demigods because they sucked and they were just warring with each other. So they just want another person to war with the demigods, but be better at it, I guess. As Godfrey says, truly a crown is warranted with strength.
Let's take another look at Malekith's boss room and the version of the Elden Ring we see there. You can see that order is forming out of the chaos. It is Marika's ego forming out of her unconsciousness. Here is another diagram of the human psyche, which represents the self-ego relationship. As you can see, in the beginning of one's life, they are one and the same. When someone is born, they are mostly operating in the unconscious realm. As they go through life, they develop an ego outside of the self. This is all well and good until we lose connection to ourself completely. When this happens, one is forced into the process of individuation, which reconnects the ego back to the self. This diagram has striking resemblance to the Elden Ring. In Fair Missoula, where Marika is still a child, herself and ego are still one.
I mean, I would just disagree with a lot of that there, and that circles kind of look like circles, but I would say is vastly different from this. And I mean, if you add another circle on top, you have a snowman. Just to borrow another common phrase, if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bicycle.
But the ego is just starting to pop out, thus creating the shadow. The Elden Ring we see in the majority of the game is the ego completely detached from the self, meaning Marika is lost and has completely forgotten who she really is. Something that happens to most people. Throughout the game, she is attempting to reconnect these two things. More on that in the next video, where we will discuss the details about the process of individuation.
So yeah, that was kind of one of the fears that I had earlier in the video, that he would make these kind of claims but not be able to substantiate them as well as I'd like. Which, I mean, I understand there's a lot of fatigue that goes into making a video this long, but I think it's kind of like a disservice to just say stuff like that and not back it up super well. And I also wanted to welcome in Calix Datura into the stream. So you've been lurking for the last week, but this video is finally making it very hard to keep your mouth shut. Well, welcome to the non-lurking section of the channel. This has been a little bit rough for me as well, to be honest. You're a psychiatrist? Ooh, wow, okay, I want to hear more now. You're a psychiatrist with training in psychoanalytic psychotherapy, and you have so much you want to comment on right now. Oh man, I'm definitely eager to hear it if you would just pop off. You think this is his analyst's first video and you really give them credit for it? Yeah. So, I mean, this is definitely I can't think of the word, like eager endeavor? Anyway, like ambitious endeavor. Wow. I feel really bad at English whenever I stream, to be honest. It's just like, can't think of the words. This is a really ambitious endeavor. Like I said many times throughout this video at this point, I feel like it's taking Jung a bit too seriously, which, I mean, he totally said that's what he was going to do, but it's definitely not for everybody. So we all have different ways of approaching the lore. I tend to be a bit more literal when trying to deal with the text as much as I can. When I do talk about symbolism, I try to stay like really grounded with it. And so I also try to avoid putting too much of an outside framework onto the games. So like, I do think it might be a little bit ironic and maybe hypocritical for me to say it that way, because obviously, like, I've talked about like Shintoism and Buddhism in relation to the like FromSoft games in the past. But to be fair, I feel as though I also don't try to like shove it into like literally everything and use that to justify like every little thing about the games as well. What are my thoughts on your ideas relating to Godfrey, Grantax, and Ratigan, which you mentioned above? Oh, I think I missed it. Ratigan and Renala's union put an end to the war, which is what allowed Godfrey to move to fight the Stormlord, assumably in Stormvale. I don't know about that. I think it's more likely, and your mileage may vary here, that the physical landscape of the lands between was very, very different in the times of Godfrey, because we are given explicit confirmation that the landscapes have shifted somewhat due to the shattering. But I've also wondered whether or not the landscapes were shifted when Ratigan became Elden Lord and integrated his Elden Rune into the Elden Ring as well. So I kind of feel like Godfrey may have just bypassed Liurnia completely and took a more direct route into either Stormvale and or Morn and Caelid. But yeah, the whole Godfrey campaign is just very strange to me based on how little information we have about it. So I don't think that Godfrey would have like needed people to clear the way, just because I think it would go against his characterization of having a quote unquote undefeated golden host or whatever. Like his wasn't the golden host, but he was like unbowed and undefeated in his campaign. So to be fair, maybe like the sword monuments are embellishing history because they were put there by the winners, you know? I do think that's a very strong possibility because we do have a kind of small contradiction, but a significant one that talks about the fading of Godfrey's eyes after he beat the Stormlord and his last worthy enemy. And so, since we're told in the Remembrance of Horaloo that he was robbed of his grace, I feel like the sword monument is a bit at odds with that. The lands between are much smaller in the game than they are in the lore, though. I don't know. Is there any proof From uses Jungian themes, or is he just trying to make connections? It's complicated. I mean, Jung's influences are so far and wide, you can kind of connect him to almost anything at this point. But I don't think that Miyazaki was looking at a text of Jungian alchemy and trying to fit it in. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe somebody wants to play the devil's advocate in the chat and say that it wasn't Miyazaki this time and it was George. And there is a good potential that George would have looked into Jung and been a Jung enjoyer, perhaps? I don't know. Maybe he talks about it in an interview sometime. Not like putting Jung into Elden Ring, but just like whether or not he likes Jung in general. All gods change the landscape. The Scarlet Rock God clearly does too. How do you feel about the giants in changing the landscape? If anything, Elden Ring is heavily referential to alchemy, and Jung is more of a scholar of alchemy than anything else. Alright, doesn't look like Calyx went off in the chat. Okay. Godfrey is not a one-man army, even if close. You doubt he literally battled everyone himself? Oh, I wasn't trying to say that. I do think he had an army, but I don't think he really needed support to get through Liurnia. Calyx says, you're pretty much of the same mind as Quelaag on Jung and his ideas. Jung is fundamentally flawed because his theories completely fail to challenge aspects of society and culture that are not immutable. Yeah, that's probably a good way to say it. Oh, that's true. Yeah, they did trigger avalanches. That's fair. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. Going back to the last section of the video here.
One thing I've noticed is that the Elden Beast looks incredibly similar to the human nervous system. You can clearly see the central column within the Elden Beast, which is identical to the spinal cord. Off of that, it branches off and looks like nerve endings. Once you reach the head of the Elden Beast, it has a bright spot in the brain. If you Google an image of consciousness, you will find something very similar.
Bruh. This isn't like a literal representation of consciousness, it's a symbolic one. I mean, obviously, he's not trying to say it's a literal representation of, like, consciousness either. It's just, like, juxtaposing it next to the, oh, this looks like a literal spinal cord, to just say, like, this looks like consciousness is, giving me a little bit of whiplash.
Similar to the Elden Beast's head.
Yeah, he does that more.
Obviously, the Elden Beast also has wings and a tail root thing going on. This to me represents its growth throughout Marika's life. From a side that took roots through the Age of the Dragons and into the Enlightenment period we see now. The Elden Beast represents the combination of our consciousness and unconsciousness.
Ponyboy asks, can you have a literal representation of consciousness thought? LOL. I feel like this is kind of like that episode of The Simpsons where Milhouse's dad and mom are playing Pictionary with like a bunch of the other parents or whatnot. And Milhouse's dad was given the clue like dignity. So he has to make a drawing that represents dignity. And then all of the other parents are like, I have no idea what you're drawing. Like, what is that? And he's like, this is dignity. And then like his wife is all angry and off screen she draws it and all the other ones are like, oh yeah, no, that's definitely dignity. Whereas, like, I feel like there's absolutely no literal drawing of dignity that can do it justice. So this is just kind of like what I'm thinking of like what consciousness looks like.
Our body and spirit. It is the totality of everything Marika is and should be. It uses Radagon as a sword, not because Radagon was some covert spy sent by the Elden Beast, but because Radagon was the physical side, the masculine side of Marika's soul. It is now how the Elden Beast does damage, physical damage, to us players.
Actually, it does holy damage for most of its attacks, but yeah, I was gonna say something else about dignity, and what was I saying? Oh yeah, consciousness. Oh yeah, if I was supposed to like play Pictionary and try to draw a consciousness, my guess would be like electrifying Frankenstein's monster to bring it back awake. To me, that's kind of like a good idea of consciousness. I don't know. Your Haley Drake +2 would beg to differ, yeah. Alright, let's go back.
Also notice the double helix structure of the sword, showing that two parts of the soul are combined into one. Where else do we see this? The Godslayer sword, which symbolizes Marika and her shadow, aka the Glowmide Queen, combined. One question that remains, however, is why do we need to kill the Elden Beast? If it's Marika's godlike self, with all things reintegrated back into it, shouldn't it be good and something that should live on? Well, I have a few thoughts on this. The first is that it's a video game, and killing gods is just part of it. The journey and understanding remains the same, but at the end, we get to kill a god. Another way of thinking about it is that we need to...
I feel like that's a kind of throwaway line there that just kind of like undermines a lot of the other stuff that he was working on in the video. And I do wish that he would try to reconcile the Glowmide Queen being Marika and being her shadow, as well as Malekith being her shadow. Is he trying to say that Malekith is literally the Glowmide Queen? I mean, you kind of might make that argument because he seals her, at least destined death, but he doesn't set that up super well in this video here.
Set this new psyche of Marika's free. As a Reddit user noticed, when you hit the Elden Beast, it sounds like glass shattering. This could symbolize that we are in fact breaking open Marika's newfound psyche and spreading it across the lands between. The last thought I have is that the Elden Beast...
I guess our psyches also sound like glass? I don't really understand that comparison. I guess he's trying to say like it's shattering when we hit it. But I mean, it's also the ring, so yeah, I don't know.
Represents the Philosopher's Stone, and by breaking it open, we unleash its power on the world. Either way, in each ending, we heal Marika, and she remains the Elden Ring. Frenzied Flame, although with the exception of the Frenzied Flame ending, which in my opinion most likely...
Hold on. I like zoned out a second, and then you just started talking about Frenzied Flame. That's totally my fault.
Power on the world. Either way, in each ending, we heal Marika, and she remains the Elden Ring. Frenzied Flame, although with the exception of
it wasn't me. Okay, it was not me.
Frenzied Flame, although with the exception of the Frenzied Flame ending, which in my opinion most likely represents something...
Oh, okay. That was just like a really bad editing error. It kind of reminded me of like Miss South Carolina, if anybody remembers that video.
Like annihilation.
Okay.
But more on that in a later video. Every ending, we reintegrate the aspects of Marika's repressed psyche and reveal her true godlike self. After that, it's up to us how we want to use that power. Before I end this video, let's take a quick look back at what we've learned, as it can be a lot to retain. We learned that Marika is playing the role of the Great Mother, whose qualities include Life Giver, Mother, Mother Nature, Nurturer, Blesser, etc. Next, we uncovered that Malekith is Marika's shadow in Jungian terms and holds within himself all the qualities that Marika hates about herself, the opposite of her persona, which is death and destruction. This is why Malekith holds Destined Death within himself. Next, we learn that Radagon is Marika's animus, the male counterpart to her soul, and takes the appearance of Godwyn because that was an important male figure in Marika's life. Finally, we learn that the Elden Beast is Marika's self. The culmination of all these aspects was reintegrated back into the psyche and is referred to as godlike. Note that when we defeat the Elden Beast, it says God defeated. In the next video, I'll show how.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Morlord than there seems here in that I also don't like videos that use phrases or they use language with factual speech as opposed to like more conjecture to make these kind of more outlandish claims. You find it hilarious that it's consistently dubbed America? Yeah, it's just kind of a par for the course looking at videos with the auto captions at this point.
These same concepts not only.
And also, Bornus, that is not nice. The but immediately contradicts you.
Apply to Marika, but also humanity, and how when we apply these terms from a personal aspect to a collective one, it paints an even clearer picture of what is happening in game. I will also show the timeline of the game and how they relate directly to the human psyche. After that, we will show the steps of individuation and how they are analogous to the alchemical process of the magnum opus. Thank you so much for watching this video. It has truly been a great work, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope it was able to.
That was a very interesting phrasing. It has truly been a great work. I think you meant to say great deal of work, I hope, but yeah.
Shed some light on what is happening in-game. If this is something that you like and enjoyed, please consider subscribing, as I will continue to produce these types of videos. I also do many live streams where I chat with you all about your interpretations. If you wouldn't mind giving this video a like, it really does mean a lot. Don't forget to comment as well, as I will be discussing all your feedback in a later video.
I do feel bad because I don't really enjoy this video. I do think it did have a couple of neat observations, but I'm not gonna sugarcoat things too much more beyond that. It definitely could have used a lot more polishing in terms of its writing as well as its editing. There were the times where the voice completely lost its train of thought because, like, I guess there were some audio issues which he didn't address or like fix up before it got uploaded, which is just kind of like amateurish. And obviously, like, he's an amateur. We're kind of all amateurs working this stuff out, but lack of attention to detail does really affect the presentation and professionalism of these kind of endeavors here. And I feel like this video suffers quite a lot on that front in kind of multiple layers there, unfortunately. So I'm actually not going to like this video, which is, I think, the first that I've done that on a stream. Like, even with like Bob the Hollows, where it kind of went out of like left field, I did like a lot of the observations earlier in his video and the discussions we had about it. But this one was honestly just really kind of painful, not only for me, but for most of you in chat to go through. So that's just kind of like saying it straight. I really don't like being that negative against like fellow content creators, but apparently I don't mind being super negative against like big companies when I make my video game reviews. So yeah, for all of you who've stuck around with me going through this video so far, thank you. I do appreciate it. I do appreciate a lot of the comments in the chat, even though it kind of derailed me and made the video go on a bit longer. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into something completely different with Lorebites, Gavlan, the Gyrm by Minespatch. I have no idea what to expect. No idea whatsoever at all. I have seen a couple of Minespatch's comics in the Discord, so I'm curious to see if like he's done his own animation or if he's incorporated his comics. So yeah. How do I feel about the Hoslos being Newman? I've never heard that theory. I would probably be extremely doubtful of it, because I'm assuming they're tarnished. Well, I guess a tarnished can be Newman too, technically, huh? Yeah, I don't know. Dialos drops a Newman urn? Oh, no, I never count that stuff as, like, being... Like, I don't count what something drops as being indicative of it classifying the organism, because by that logic, you could say that the ants down in Deeproot Depths are Newman. And just to give another point of comparison than the ants, which is like, obviously, no, an ant isn't a Newman, or is it? Vsauce, Michael here. In Bloodborne, we have Rom drop the Kin Cold Blood, but she is confirmed Great One according to her trophy description. We do have some random hunter NPCs that drop Kin Cold Blood in Canehurst and in the Nightmare of Mensis, but I don't think people are going to argue that those NPCs are kin as well. And in the Tumuru Isle Chalice Dungeon, we do have a couple corpses that drop Great One Cold Blood, but I don't think most people are going to be on board with saying that the Tumerians are Great Ones themselves, although it is technically contentious. This video is a supposition made on supposition and stated as fact with a degree of authority that he hasn't demonstrated that he deserves. Yeah, you said it more directly than I could have, but I do think that's accurate, unfortunately. Thoughts on the idea that the Nox are the Newman, like the race versus nationality or citizenship? Oh, like in general? Yeah, it's kind of hard to say, but yeah, I do think it's probably fair to say that some of the Nox are Newman. I don't know if they're all Newman. For what it's worth, the Nox are canon in that they're a cold-blooded race. Let's go ahead and look it up. Let's see if it has a hyphen. Okay. So in the Night Maiden and Swordstress puppets... Oh yeah, I'm going to have to make this bigger. So... These sisters, members of a cold-blooded race who wield flowing weapons, became puppets of their own volition. A cold-blooded here kind of means alien. It doesn't... I don't think it literally means cold-blooded. I don't remember off the top of my head. Oh, no. This is definitely like Sumataichi. So, like, literally, like, their blood is cool. But they're called... Okay, they're called, like, an alien race here. Ijinshu. So... this is the character for other, like in Otherworld, like Spirit World or Isekai, like this is that E. This is the character for person, and then this one is like character for like seed or type variety. So like other person race. So they are cold-blooded. They're descended of cold-blooded aliens essentially. So yeah. I do think the Nox and stuff were Newman, which would potentially tie into the idea of Marika being closely affiliated with them. Dialos wears a tutu? I missed that one. Tarnished Archaeologist does the same thing to a lesser extent, and you find him much less convincing as a result. Yeah, so, Calyx, I think you came into the stream later, but I've been watching a lot more Tarnished Archaeologist off stream because I got some comments on my other video that I didn't understand exactly what he's talking about because I didn't watch all of his videos. So I was like, all right, well, I'll go back. And I do think a lot of Tarnished Archaeologist's weaknesses are that the videos aren't self-contained, and so some claims in some videos actually do directly contradict claims in other videos, which I've been like taking a little bit of notes on. And his or their like positions are kind of made out of like convenience, where they'll support one theory in one instance and another theory in another instance, but neither theory might work with each other. So let me go ahead and find my note real quick. So I do have like a tangible example of this, maybe. And of course I say maybe because Tarnished Archaeologist just kind of like is a little bit wishy-washy sometimes, flip-floppy, whatever you want to call it. Um. Oh yeah. So in one video, I think when he's talking about the Lane secret and the Nox, he says that the tree worship sprouted kind of in Lanedel's Nox church thing, where you can find like Lionel's armor set as well as like Fia's death robe or whatever it's called. And so that he makes the argument that the tree worship started there, but on the video immediately after that, he said that the Erd tree came from the grafted great tree, or like the Erd tree was grafted onto the great tree. And so that would just directly contradict each other, that the Nox came up with the tree worship, but the great tree still existed before the Erd tree, amongst other stuff along those lines. And yeah, I was thinking about reacting to another Tarnished archaeologist video soon. I had one on the timeline or like the list here for a long time, but I realized it's actually one of his more recent ones, so I have like a lot more videos to catch up on before I get here. But I am thinking about reacting to what was it? I guess I would need to open the channel. Let's do the full video list. The 3 creeds of the Erd tree. I think this is the one that I would want to react to directly on stream, because I found a lot wrong with it. And despite these having like the full red bars, I haven't really watched them, because this is the one that was on the list, but I was like, oh wait, this says part 2. So then I was trying to like read its description, and like none of these videos say part 1, so I'm like, oh, is this part 1? It doesn't say it, but that's not too important. But yeah, I do kind of agree that Tarnished Archaeologist has those issues, and we'll probably look at his video soon. The one that I just mentioned about like the 3 things. So another issue that I remember with like Tarnished Archaeologist was the Great Tree's initial depictions being coniferous and only existing in places like Stormvale, but then the actual Erd trees being deciduous and being more representative in Lane. But the Tree and Beast Surcoat actually has that kind of a coniferous depiction, and it is said to actually be the Erd tree. So it is really easy to overlook those kind of details, but he does use kind of very factual language when he is directly contradicted by some other bits of evidence. And so I think my biggest criticism about TA for now is they make very specific claims, but they don't necessarily have the whole picture in mind, which can kind of undermine their initial claims. And they just kind of keep building off those initial claims, which I feel might have false premises. And they get a bit convoluted by a lot of the historical tie-ins, which makes sense on a small level, but the premises are still flawed. So sorry to go on such a tangent about that, but it's just kind of been eating away at me for a little bit now. Why don't we find any Nox in the Nameless Eternal City is because ants ate them all. That's why the ants dropped the Newman runes. Ants are eating the Nox Newman. Maybe. It might be possible that when the Great Will, quote-unquote, banished actually / defeated the Nox, it could just be talking about the Nameless Eternal City's Noxi specifically, but I don't know. Yeah. And so you see the same thing too. Yeah, I'll probably address that because I have seen a kind of alarming trend in the community at large to just kind of run with a lot of the things that he says so matter-of-factly, unfortunately. I don't want to do it, but it's kind of growing. House Oslo is implied to be very important, like perhaps royalty outside the lands between. It's described as great and illustrious, and such a direct line to a god would be a good reason for that, but yeah, it's speculation. So, I mean, they could be Newman, but it's kind of questionable, like, how significant that is either way. Is the Glomide Queen a Newman? Maybe, we don't know. You wonder what the Erd Tree fruit would taste like? I don't know. Tears. Salt. TA was wild for thinking Mikola wanted to make a giant golden needle to stab into the sun. I don't necessarily think he wanted a giant needle to stab into the sun in TA's video, but there might be something to the idea that draining the sun of gold could allow Mikola to take that gold. That might be a little bit wild. I don't necessarily know if gold comes from the sun, but yeah, I wasn't totally on board with the needle idea anyway. But yeah, we could talk about that later. TA's videos are so convincing and quality at first glance, but rewatching them, they start to lose that initial luster, clear logic. Yeah, and that, like I said, it's because it gets a little bit convoluted due to the historical tie-ins, which serve to strengthen his points, but they're just a little bit too distracting and don't actually tie directly into the game the way that I think TA thinks they do, unfortunately. All right, so enough like ranting about that because I hate it. So next we'll be going into that video by Minespatch. So let's dive in.
I'll be ready to wheel and deal come next time.
What's a Gyrm? Gyrms are miners who are not human or dwarves. They hate invaders in their mines, setting up traps and other contraptions to prevent it. They are friends of the Rat King and their people. What separates Gavlan from other Gyrm? Gavlan is a free-spirited Gyrm who travels from town to town. You meet him at No Man's Wharf.
You know what's funny? I never really thought of Gavlan as a Gyrm until I saw the title of this video. Probably because he's like not all like blue and gray and desaturated as crap. I mean, that just goes to show you how much like attention I've paid to the environmental lore details of Dark Souls 2. They're pronounced Gyrm. They're dwarves of Dark Souls? Or Gyrm? Gyrm or Gyrm? I don't know. You were not expecting this to be Minespatch's voice.
Why does he tolerate all humans compared to the other Gyrm? Souls. He likes being a merchant. The other Gyrm are wary of human prejudice, just like the rats. Why does he trade?
I don't know. I don't know if they're wary of the other humans like the rats. I think they might be weedy. Oh no, maybe it is an R. It just looks really goofy.
Just like.
Oh, maybe it's just the font. No, wait, no, that is a T, isn't it?
He likes being a merchant. The other Gyrm are wary of human prejudice.
Okay, that is an R. It looked like a T for a second. So yeah, just as a note to Minespatch, this font is pretty hard to read, especially with like the offsetting of the drop shadow. So, yeah.
Just like the rats. Why does he trade? For the Enterprise. Being a simple man, he buys things from the player in his mobile pawn shop, and also deals with poisons. Why the poisons? One of the locations we meet him is at Earthen Peak. The place is overrun by Mytha's poison that she uses for beautification.
Psst! Have you heard?
Ow.
You know why they're extracting that poison, do you? Well, apparently, there's this monster lady, right? And the poison, well, does wonders for her body. You know, the health and beauty and that sort of stuff.
He probably traveled there for his side enterprise of selling poison wares. Such items make him the most valuable merchant in Drag Lake, after Malentia and Wellinger. If anyone has future suggestions for characters and species, comment down below. As always, criticism is always welcome under this roof.
You know, that was a very cute video. When was this made? 5 months ago? Okay. That's a little bit surprising. This almost seems like a video that was made like 12 years ago. Obviously, DS2 isn't that old. But yeah, just the resolution stuff. So I don't know if this is like more of a style thing, but if it's... I mean, it kind of feels like it's supposed to be, but if it's not, you can always zoom in on your footage. It'll make it look a lot more garbage just because like the resolution doesn't match up, but you can get rid of like the black boxes. It's not like the worst thing in the world, especially if you have the black down there below for your subtitles and stuff. But no, this was a very straightforward video. It doesn't really presuppose too much. It does have very respectable speculation about why he goes to Earthen Peak to get poison for his beautiful wares, and does make the very crucial mistake of not telling us that he wheels and that he deals. So that is like the biggest point of criticism, other than just like the drop shadow and like the little bit of the font choice there. But I enjoyed it. I really liked the kind of upbeat, cheery music in the background too.
Setting.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot. So, for anyone in chat, if you did like the Centered Tarnished video, that is the link to the Centered Tarnished. Centered Tarnished. And then now we have Minespatch's video that'll be linking into the chat here. I also liked a lot of the little animations. They're very cute, very stylized. And remember, Minespatch is a member of the community, so I'm sure they will enjoy the interactions there. So yeah, I liked it. And let's go ahead and subscribe. A simple lore video to those who don't want to waste a half hour reading a wiki article. Hope this helps non-players understand as well. Yeah, no. Perfectly set up for that. Yeah, just a little bit, feels like an artifact of a previous age, for better or worse. Alright. So now we have one more video left on the docket with... Oh no, I guess we technically have two. We might get through one, maybe both. It depends on like how much I pause the videos, which apparently I just pause all the videos all the time. So Alchemy explains so much about Elden Ring's story. Marika's secret revealed by Max Derrat. I don't believe I've watched anything by them before, and this was suggested to me as well as that other video. And apparently this got Minespatch into the lore. Not like this video, but like this creator. So curious to see where this goes.
Though I don't think I talk about it as often as everybody thinks, alchemy is something I've discussed a decent amount on this channel. I've discussed it enough that anytime a reference to alchemy is made in a game, movie, or TV show, people want my perspective on it. As of late, people have been feverishly asking for an extensive analysis of alchemy's influence on Elden Ring. Though I did reference one alchemical concept in my Elden Ring mythology video on the ancient dragons and the crucible, that of the prima materia, there are a vast number of other examples left to go through. Today, I will be going through all the references that I and others have picked up on thus far.
That's great because, well, I do know a tiny bit about alchemy. I'm definitely not super well versed into it, and people do bring it up quite a bit. But like I've said before, I tend to view a lot of these lenses as just kind of things that anyone can change to fit their kind of own individual interpretation. So I tend to not take it too seriously, although there might be a bit more to alchemy specifically, because there do seem to be a lot of the parallels from what I've heard.
First exhibit will be a video that a lot of you have been sending me. The video is called Elden Ring is an Allegory for Alchemy by a YouTuber named Ziostorm. He has been doing wonderful videos on Elden Ring as of late, and this video is no exception. Though I don't agree with everything that is said in this video, the majority of it is very intriguing and worth your time. I will quickly go through all of the primary claims made in that video and then add extra detail where possible.
You know, I like the cut of his jib, being very direct about what he saw, what he is going to touch up on. Yeah, that's just I like the setting of expectations.
Start off with just two small things that I disagree with. First, Zyostorm links the alchemical symbol of the Ouroboros with Rykard and the god-devouring serpent. I don't think this is an apt comparison. The Ouroboros is a word that derives from ancient Greek, translating specifically to tail-devouring. The god-devouring serpent does not bite their own tail. Although I will say Zyostorm's invoking of the Ouroboros symbol is appropriate. I just think he's attributing it to the wrong thing in Elden Ring.
Right. I wonder if the reason Zyostorm said that is because of like the sigil for Rykard, where it looks like the snake devouring the world is kind of similar to an Ouroboros. So I kind of agree with both if like that's what Zyostorm was going for.
In my opinion, the alchemical Ouroboros represents the form and function of the Crucible, which I talked about in my aforementioned video. In Alchemy, the Ouroboros represents the state of the universe before it came into being, when every aspect of life was unified in one cosmic seed. The Ouroboros symbolizes this state because the snake remains alive.
Knowing Zyostorm, he probably just thought snake equals snake. Wow. Stella apparently saw this video but has no memory of it. God-eating serpent always felt like a huge Orochi no Kami reference to you. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I can even see that with like the whole family aspect.
Though it is simultaneously killing itself. The alchemists gave this state of the universe a name, one that I mentioned a minute ago, prima materia, which is Latin for first matter. Various item descriptions in Elden Ring give the Crucible the same attributes. Though the Crucible is not a literal snake devouring its tail, its function is the exact same as the prima materia. I'm surprised that Zyostorm didn't mention this, particularly because he seems to be quite knowledgeable about alchemy. The equating of the Ouroboros with the prima materia is as introductory a concept in alchemy as knowledge of the four elements. This leads me to my second and final criticism of Zyostorm's video. He equates Elden Ring's version of the prima materia, the Crucible, with the entirety of the lands between. You could technically say that the lands between are a reflection of the Crucible because everything that is in the lands between was once mixed together in the Crucible. However, that does not make them the same thing.
Okay, I'm curious as to what he believes the Crucible is. It sounds like he might pivot into a direction that kind of more aligns with my thoughts, and that the Crucible came later, and there might be something before that, which could be related to the snake, the prima materia, perhaps. But again, I don't know enough about alchemy to like truly get what he's insinuating here, so I'm just kind of like sharing my own curiosity here.
It would be like pointing to the seed of a tree and calling the seed a tree. But aside from those two things, I absolutely loved everything else about Zyostorm's video. Not only did he pick up on things that blew my mind, it led me down a path to new discoveries that help explain so much more of Elden Ring's universe. Zyostorm's primary discovery is the similarities between certain images and concepts in Elden Ring and a 15th century alchemical text by a man named Sir George Ripley, a text called the Ripley Scroll. On this scroll, Ripley outlined a recipe for the Philosopher's Stone. Now, the Philosopher's Stone, of course, is the primary goal of alchemy, because it contains within it the elixir of eternal life. I would like to draw your attention to two images on this scroll. The first image is one we'll only spend a moment on. In the middle circle, you see Sir George Ripley being presented a book on alchemy by an ancient Egyptian sage named Hermes Trismegistus. The 8 circles surrounding the middle circle represent the 8 steps required to create the first part of the Philosopher's Stone. Zyostorm noticed a similarity between this image and the shapes in the fire giant's eye. At first, I thought that maybe the 9 circles in the eye represented the 9 realms in Norse mythology, given the numerous references to Norse mythology that are already in the game. Now, I'm leaning more towards Zyostorm's interpretation because of what we see in the second image. Here, we see 7 men pouring in 7 different ingredients into an alchemical bath. In the bath are a man crowned by the sun, a woman crowned by the moon, and a tree stretching upward. Though Zylstorm does not say this outright, I think he was implying a similarity between this image and the placement of the divine towers around the Erd Tree and the 7 shards of the Elden Ring. The similarity.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about the divine towers in relation of these. The 7 runes.
Becomes all the more compelling when you consider what the man and woman are attempting to do in the alchemical bath. They are trying to unify into one being, into the alchemical rebus. A man and a woman unified inside one body is obviously similar to the characters Marika and Radagon.
I like the idea, but I am curious about the whole aspect of Radagon representing the sun. I guess you could probably make that argument because during this time of Godfrey, the Erd Tree might have been more like the sun, but I feel like Godfrey is probably the better choice for that. Or if not Godfrey, definitely Godwyn. But yeah, I digress.
They're trying to unify into one being, into the alchemical rebus. A man and a woman unified inside one body is obviously similar to the characters Marika and Radagon. Radagon, of course, was split off from the body of Marika. Now, let me expand upon the rebus. In order to create the Philosopher's Stone, or something approaching the same level of divinity, it is necessary to unify opposite elements. The rebus has repeatedly been identified with the Philosopher's Stone and its sacred coincidence of opposites, because it is a hermaphroditic being, a union of the opposite sexes and genders. As for why the man and the woman are designated by the sun and the moon, this reflects another tendency of the alchemists, to project masculine and feminine qualities onto the outside world. There are 2 prominent examples of this. One, of course, is attributing male and masculine to the sun, and female and feminine to the moon. The other example of this is attributing male and masculine to gold, and female and feminine to silver. Now get ready, this is where I am going to start blowing your minds. There are 2 Latin words that are used to designate this union of male and female, gold and silver, and sun and moon. Those words are Sol and Luna. Quickly, before I explain the relevance of Sol and Luna to Elden Ring, I will point out that there is another game made by the makers of Elden Ring that references this sacred alchemical union, Dark Souls 2. In that game, there are 2 locations known as Belfry Sol and Belfry Luna. The item description for the Bellkeeper's Seal in that game explains the bells that are found in both belfries. Quote, "The twin bells symbolize the bond between 2 lovers who can never be united. 2 lovers of opposite sexes longing to be united into one whole." Back to Elden Ring. The union of Sol and Luna is referenced in a couple of ways. There is Castle Sol, which is found in the mountain tops of the Giants. There, you can find the item known as the Eclipse Shodel. The item's name and description, of course, reference the crossing of the moon in front of the sun, which is a certain type of union. The union of Sol and Luna via gold and silver is something referenced a number of times in Elden Ring. There's the full moon crossbow, the inseparable sword, but most importantly, the twinned armor. The twinned armor decked out.
I'm a little bit surprised he didn't include like the Eclipse Great Shield and stuff, but yeah. Estella said Sol and Luna literally just mean sun and moon. Yeah, my mind isn't blown yet, but maybe that's because I already knew about Sol and Luna and that stuff. I don't know. You would agree Radagon is a symbol of the sun with the eclipse imagery of Liurnia and the Church of Baus? Maybe. I mean, it is like he's more aligned with the Erd Tree, and you might be able to argue the Erd Tree is like the sun. I'm fine with that. It's just I feel like there are other figures who represent the sun more strongly, and the idea of women being attached to the moon, I think, is just kind of more of a convenience thing, more linked to menstruation in general. Because depending on your culture, Like in the more tropic regions, it tended to be that the sun was seen as more masculine because it has a stronger presence and is more detrimental to bounty and fertility because too much sun can destroy crops. Whereas in more temperate regions, the sun is seen as more feminine in nature because it provides more bounty. And in the tropic regions, the moon is seen as more bounteous and feminine because of like the way that dew forms on plants, which like spurs on their growth. So it's a little bit difficult to talk about this stuff, and obviously like me making those references is divorced completely from like this whole like alchemical stuff. But I'm just trying to say like there are other ways that women can be read, but I feel like for the whole alchemy symbolism, that women being attached to moon is just a little bit lazy. And that's not like a criticism of Max Derrat as much as it is like me not really enjoying like me not being an alchemy enjoyer, I guess.
Out in both gold and silver, references the twins Darian and Devon, both of whom are also known as D. The twins are described as being of 2 bodies and 2 minds, but 1 single soul. Then, of course, there's the matrimonial bond between Radagon and Rennala. Radagon represents the gold in order, and Rennala represents the full moon, which is associated with silver. I pointed out the proof for this in my video on Ronnie the Witch. One of the many pieces of proof I provide in that video includes the alchemical symbol for silver, which is the...
So just to quickly defend my point about like Radagon not being like super gold or like super sunny, I feel like when he says like he represents the golden order, yeah, that's really funny and like really makes me look like an idiot. But to be fair, I do think this idea of the golden order and golden order fundamentalism is a specific form of gold that isn't like the more pure gold of the prior era of Godfrey. And of course, we can reference the red tinted gold of Godfrey's time that became more yellowed with Radagon. So maybe you can make the argument that Radagon's gold is like the better gold for that. But going back to the whole idea of the twinned armor set, as Max Derrat was just talking about, it is made from a union of silver and gold. So yeah, maybe he is correct in saying that the silver came from the Rennala side of the union and the gold came from the Radagon side of the union. But I typically view it as Radagon incorporating both and kind of being beyond Rennala because he abandons her. And so I think Radagon is supposed to represent both gold and silver rather than just the gold side of his marriage. If anyone's associated with the sun, you'd say it's Godwin for sure. Yeah. It does seem to be a link between the sun and the moon with their marriage. It's worth taking into account that From is Japanese, and Japanese mythology is in the female sun, male moon strain. It's kind of hard to say because obviously these games, or like this game, is very Western inspired. Everyone's going to like play devil's advocate and say, you know, it's all George who's the mastermind, but who really knows? Killer King, welcome back to the stream. Thank you. Is this leading towards Fishman being a messed up Philosopher's Stone, maybe? Maybe. Who knows?
The moon. There's one more mind-blowing detail that I will conclude with, but before I get to that, I need to give you an important piece of qualifying information. Alchemy, obviously, is not science. It was a religious tradition built around the projecting of subjective values onto the material world. This caused alchemic theory to become very inconsistent as a result, leaving historians with the difficult job of trying to find a canonical interpretation. This holds true for the application of alchemy in the world of Elden Ring as well.
Hold on there. Let's go ahead and appreciate these Yu-Gi-Oh cards for sale and the price drops that go along with them in our search for alchemy. To be fair, when I first got into Magic the Gathering when I was in 3rd grade, I saw like a deck at Borders, and I was like, oh, are these tarot cards? Because tarot cards interested me because I saw like this weird-ass show on like sci-fi where this girl was trying to like foretell the future with tarot cards. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. So little did I know that quote unquote magic cards weren't tarot cards, but nonetheless, like the art of the magic cards was still really cool. And I got into them like when I entered middle school and people actually played. So anyway, the targeted ads. Oh man, these targeted ads are getting meta, infecting me right now. No, I've never really played Yu-Gi-Oh, but Pot of Greed. Oh, you even recognized it? Nice. The rules of Yu-Gi-Oh are truly arcane. Okay, so completely unrelated story. Speaking of the arcane and Yu-Gi-Oh specifically, apparently in Korean, the starting date of the Korean War was June 6th. Or wait. No, it'd be June 25th, right? Yeah. What am I saying? June 6th. That's the same number. So it's June 25th. So June is represented by the number 6, Yuk, and the number for 2 is E, and the number for 5 is O. So Yuk-E-O, Yu-Gi-Oh. So I had a Korean teacher who told us the story of her nephew getting really into Yu-Gi-Oh, and she's like, "Oh wow, my nephew is really interested in the Korean War. Like, wow, he's really interested in his own history, completely oblivious to the card game that was taking the world by storm and getting all the little children's interested in it." So, yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh, Korean War. Now you'll never forget it.
For example, if you accept the similarities between the Ripley Scroll and Elden Ring, you might have deduced a link between the union of Sol and Luna by the tree, and the union of Ratigan and Marika in the Erd tree. However, the truth is a bit more complicated. Sir George Ripley didn't appear to link the element of silver with the moon or gold with the sun in his scroll. Rather, he equated the sun with sulfur and the moon with Mercury. Moreover, Marika seems to be anything but friendly with the moon, given that she initially sent Ratigan to take over the land of Liurnia, where Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, resided. Plus, Ratigan had children with Renala before he had children with Marika, which would naturally lead to some enmity between the two women. But despite these contradictions, this does not render the theory of Alchemy's association with Elden Ring null and void. I will repair any doubt you may have in my theory by pointing to the aforementioned elements of sulfur and mercury. When Ziostorm pointed out George Ripley's association of these elements with the sun and the moon, I was confused. Normally, when sulfur and mercury are evoked in alchemy, they are evoked as a part of the Tria Prima, which is Latin for the three primes. According to the alchemist Paracelsus the Great, all of the universe is made up of the three primes.
Dude, that guy looks like he could be in a punk band. Like, it looks like his hair like keeps going, like it's almost like a faux hawk or something like that, the headband. It's kind of crazy. Anyway, I wanted to read Calix's comments that they learned something very interesting in a video on linguistics and English dialects. It was talking about the color of gold and pointing out something that you had realized when you were learning Japanese. What was it? And then Bella says, do you support the theory that Marika and Ratigan have always been one person, never separate? I am on the fence about it. Like, if we ever get more information which tells me something different, I'll accept it. But for now, since I don't really have evidence of Ratigan ever, like, walking about on his own, I do tend to believe that they were one being, with the caveat of the one item description that mentions that Ratigan's children didn't become demigods until he married Marika, which is kind of strange to me and seems counterintuitive, because if he is Marika, then the children should sort of still have her DNA, or like, you know, the equivalent or whatever. But it's kind of hard to make that stuff fit in nicely to Elden Ring when we have millennia potentially sprouting buds that create Millicent and her sisters, who might be genetic equivalents to millennia, but might also be slightly different, which is very strange if true. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think Radigan and Marika wanted to marry Renala to marry the sun and moon red? And moon, sorry, to marry the sun and moon / Red King, White Queen / Rebus, but Renala was not strong enough or something, and they settled on their own union out of desperation, and that didn't work too since Millennia and Mikola are messed up. No, generally the way that I think of it is, and headcanon alert, I think the Age of Abundance was coming to an end. The Erd Tree was no longer producing its sap, its tears, its amber, whatever you want to call it, and the Erd Tree was starting to die because such is the course of all life. And Marika, in a way similar to Gwyn, didn't want her age to come to an end because her age is supposed to be an epoch of life. And with life, there is death. Like, that's an incontrovertible fact in the descriptions for like the remembrance of the regal ancestor, as well as poison armament and poison mist, that from life comes death, such as the cycle of rebirth in like the lands between. So with the Erd Tree dying, she wants to perpetuate it. The question is, how do you do that? I believe the answer came to her in the form of the Golden Order, which is where we get her spoken echoes, which says that she declares her intent to study the depths of the Golden Order, and through literally understanding grace, like applying int to faith, she is going to extend the effects of the grace and perpetuate her age of the Erd Tree, her age of life. And so life in the form of Godfrey's time meant things died, but life in Radigan's time meant things continued. So I think Godfrey still had death in his period, and Radigan's period created a stasis of quote-unquote boundless life, which is why I think we have the curses of limitless youth with Mikola and boundless growth with Melania and the Scarlet Rat. But again, that is my headcanon as to justify why she needed that. Oh yeah, and I didn't tie that back into Renala. So I think, well, I kind of did, but I didn't say it explicitly. So I think she needed Renala's potential lunar sorcery specifically to quote-unquote drain the sun of gold. So maybe she used the moon to create a shadow or something to seal destined death away. Maybe, like, not like literally, like because of Malekith and all that, but we are told that the moon can sort of keep destined death at bay by virtue of creating an eclipse. And so if you do tie the Erd Tree to the sun, and we're told that carrying astrology was still active during Godfrey's time, but it withered on the vine, most likely due to Radigan, aka the Golden Order's fettering of it, aka the union, the marriage of Radigan and Renala. That's kind of what makes the most sense to me. Was it Radigan who the Giants cursed to have red hair and hated it? No, I think it's the opposite way around. That Radigan, well, Marika got cursed, and she might have like pushed it off onto a different part of herself, and maybe that's where Radigan comes from. It's really weird. So did Calyx, okay. Calyx said, this video made the point that the hue that the historic Anglo-Saxons considered gold was actually significantly more red in hue. It was distinctly red gold. Interesting. So, and you say that's similar to like the Japanese version of red gold, like Akagin? A giant purging stone? Not exactly, but kind of similar. Oh yeah, I see what you mean, like the moon is a purging stone. I don't know, because there's a lot that goes in with the eclipse. Like, it seems to have the power to keep away destined death, but it also seems to be able to invite in rebirth. I don't know. You don't think that the red gold of the Crucible era was just arbitrary and random? It was actually a thing? No, I agree with that. But you're saying it's not Akagin with like the Japanese? Okay. If the eclipse is supposed to protect against destined death, and an eclipse blocks out the light of the sun, does that mean the sun is the source of destined death? That is a thought that I've had. I don't know if it's true, because we do have like the weird associations of death being called a shadow. So it's kind of hard to say that for sure. But to be fair, one reason why I do think it could be a stronger possibility is that other than Fair Missoula never having like the sun go away. When we do meet like the random corpses that are crucified throughout the lands between, they are inert, inactive during the day when the sun is out. But when the sun goes away and the moon comes out, not literally, like the moon doesn't have to come out because, you know, it could be cloudy. They all kind of wake up and start screaming. Oh, similar to the view in what's considered to be green and blue in English and Japanese. Okay, like ao, or like, yeah, okay, midori. Gold used to be a different color in the past. Okay, kind of like the whole wine-colored thing. I get you. Thank you. Death being a shadow is very propaganda sounding. You get that from Enya. I think it might be called a shadow somewhere else, but you might be right about that. Yeah, the blue means go. Okay. Alright. Didn't expect to get that sidetracked, so let's go back to the video here.
Which are sulfur, mercury, and salt. These three elements, accordingly, correspond to the human soul, spirit, and body. In respect to the aforementioned philosopher's stone, one would only obtain it if the correct mixture of the three primes existed both within the human body and inside the stone when it was obtained. The alchemical journey was as much internal as it was external, after all. Now, George Ripley was around before Paracelsus instantiated the doctrine of the three primes, so the element of salt wasn't part of Ripley's process. But because the Tria Prima is one of the more consistent alchemical doctrines, like the doctrine of Sol and Luna, I propose that From Software overrode.
He must have heard us talking crap about those Yu-Gi-Oh cards on the sidebar.
Ripley's perception with Paracelsus's. Now, what is the evidence for this? It's the meaning of Marika's name. Marika is a Polish name that means of the sea or bitter. Now, what is bitter about the sea? Well, that would be salt. In the alchemical literature,
Fudge, I was muted. Okay, damn it. What was I saying? Okay. I think it's because I paused the video, like, with the space bar, as always. Okay, so what I had been saying was... Let me play it again. I'm gonna, like, back up to regain my train of thought.
name that means of the sea or bitter.
Okay, so while I appreciate the kind of comparison here, I do feel like this can be a little bit contentious because I have heard other people argue that Marika is derivative of Maria, which is obviously derivative of Mary, and do I really need to say any more about that? However, he might still be right here, and this is kind of why I bring up my example of like the whole Rorschach thing, where I feel like people can get out of these kind of connections what they're looking into it. And so it kind of makes it very difficult to rely on outside pieces of information to inform me about the game directly. And thank you all for letting me know I was muted. Yeah. Moment of silence, well deserved. Maybe it just worked out. You might justify it as the salt is the negative part of the seawater, which is bitter. Bitter is bitter, yeah. Alright.
Now, what is bitter?
There's actually a connection between Mary and the sea? Okay, cool. Let me know about that. Curious to hear it. And Crane Sparrow, Wiscoism, welcome into the chat. Mary Magdalene specifically, it's a Gnostic gospel thing. Okay. Once again, we end up back at a bunch of European names are ultimately Hebrew. Yeah, you might be right about that. Like, Marika could be, like I said, Maria, which is Mary. Aboriginal meaning, Maori, quiet and careful. Yeah, it feels like... Okay, yeah, this is kind of maybe more of a specific reading of it, as opposed to like the official one. Mary washed clothes with water, seas have water. Okay.
It means of the sea or bitter. Now, what is bitter about the sea? Well, that would be salt. In the alchemical literature, the arcane salt from the Tria Prima has a number of symbolisms that are closely connected with it, such as the bitterness of the sea. George Ripley commented on the trait of bitterness, saying that each thing in its first matter is corrupt and bitter. This includes the very first matter, the aforementioned prima materia. Just as the prima materia / crucible was responsible for birthing all life as we know it, all life on our planet originated from the sea. What this suggests is that though Zowstorm was right in equating sulfur and Sol with Radigan, he might have been incorrect in attributing Mercury and Luna with Marika. Rather, Mercury would be associated with lunar Queen Renala, and salt with Queen Marika. To repeat what I said before, alchemy is often inconsistent and confusing. Despite that fact, alchemy's appeal continues to this day because of its attempt to unify the material world with the world of morals and values. It's a form of poetry, disguised as a supposedly chemical procedure. The beauty of that poetry inspired its inclusion in several other works of fiction. If you would like to learn more about alchemy's extensive influence on video games, whether it's from Silent Hill, Xenosaga, The Witcher, consider checking out my video titled Video Game Academics, Alchemy. I will link to that in the description box below. I refuse to believe that these allusions to alchemy within Elden Ring are all just coincidences.
So I was going to say one thing, and this, is probably more about my ignorance of alchemy than anything else, but it does feel really weird to me if Marika is meant to be represented in salt, because I just have the idea of like literally salting the earth, making it like uninhabitable for like plant life specifically. And obviously that's not what they were trying to go for with like the Erd tree. And so I don't know. That's kind of like why I treat this stuff with like a lot of skepticism. So there might be like parallels, but I'm not entirely sure like how much was intended. Not just because of like the whole like language barriers, because I do think it is obvious that like FromSoft has done quite a lot of research into other cultures and things like this specifically, but just with as much as like Elden Ring repeats the story beat of their previous games to certain extents, like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, would it be fair to say that Dark Souls and Bloodborne were kind of allegories for alchemy as well? Maybe somebody can make that video and try to convince me in the future, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I obviously do appreciate a lot of these observations, and I do think like they're fairly grounded within the context of it being alchemy. I just don't know if I accept alchemy as like the basis of Elden Ring as strongly as some others may imply. And so even with his statements here, I don't think he's trying to say like, oh, like all of the game is literally based off of alchemy, but I do think he probably thinks it was inspired, which I would agree with to some extent. The St. Mary's of the Sea is a small fishing village located on the south central coast of the Mediterranean in France in the Camargue region of Bouches-du-Rhône. They indicate that the site has been venerated as a holy place by a succession of cultures, including Celts, Romans, Christians, and Romania gypsies. I feel like they named it after Mary, not like Mary came from there and then they named it after her. It's just like a religious thing, like calling so many churches like St. Peter or any other like saint or whatnot. Marika was known for her grudges and punishment of sin. She was pretty salty, huh? Stella says, the reason it's confusing to people, it's because the bitter meaning goes to a Hebrew name, but of the sea would go back to Maris, Latin for of the sea, which is not a name, but it is in some epithets. Stella Maris, star of the sea? Okay. She kind of salted the mountaintops. That was the snow. It's snow. It's not salt, it's snow. According to one local legend, after the resurrection of Christ, Mary Magdalene, Marie Salome, Marie Jacob, Lazarus, and several other disciples were forced in 45 AD to flee the Holy Land by boat. Following a perilous journey across the Mediterranean Sea, the boat eventually landed near the present-day village of Saint Marie de la Mer, where the passengers went ashore. Yeah, I feel like that might be local cultural appropriation. I don't know like how archaeologically accepted that is of a story. Because we do have like the whole stuff of, was it like, yeah, I'm pretty sure like even the skull of Mary was said to randomly show up in this one like church, most conveniently when they like needed more funding or something. And that's kind of like something that happened quite a bit over the history of the church, where like they would come up with these random artifacts that would like draw in more attention and like improve like their cash flow and stuff. I don't know. I tend to be super skeptical of that stuff, and I'm just too ignorant to know like how veritable it is. Any art is a tapestry of inspiration and won't be an exact match or copy to any formula. That'd be too easy and less interesting if it was anyways. True. It'd be easy for people with no training in etymology to conflate the words. True. Oh, that's cool, Boris. Yeah. If you can give us any more insight about like Hebrew etymology, that'd be dope.
Especially because previous games by the same game creators seem to have been inspired by alchemical concepts as well. Prior to Elden Ring's release, I demonstrated the potential links to alchemy in both the Dark Souls series and Bloodborne, and Elden Ring just continues to prove my intuition.
So apparently Max heard my comments. Maybe I'll need to check these videos out as well.
If you want to see how the Tria Prima influenced both Dark Souls and Bloodborne, go check out my video titled The Hidden Secrets of Dark Souls, The World Soul. If you want to see the mound of evidence linking the concept of the Philosopher's Stone to Bloodborne, check out my video titled Bloodborne's Hidden Secret to Becoming a God. Links to both videos will be in the description box below. Thank you very, very much for watching. Please make sure to hit that like button if you like this video. That helps me out a lot. Make sure to subscribe for more in-depth analysis of Elden Ring and a plethora of other forms of profound media. If you want to support the work that I do here, please consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar. I will put links to both of those in the description box below as well. Finally, I want to give some special thanks to Locksneed Martin and The Hour Man for reviewing the script for this video. Until my next video, I want to remind you as always and as per usual, stay yellow.
Alright, cool. That was a pretty good video. Obviously, I feel like you either come into the video agreeing with the alchemy stuff from the outset or not. Which, you know, there's nothing wrong with that because that's what it was confined to, so I can totally respect that. I did go ahead and copy it, so I'm going to paste it into chat. That's the video if you want to give him a like. I'm probably going to add the two videos that he just mentioned over here onto my playlist, just to see how much more I can disagree with this guy in the future, right? And save it right here. Brilliant. Okay. Locksneed Martin sounded like a spell from Harry Potter. Well, it's kind of a pun off of Lockheed and Martin, the infamous weapon makers, or whatever they are. All the graves at the concentrated snowfield and the Halig Tree have Hebrew letters? Really? I didn't know that. If you have any more info about that, I would definitely be interested in learning more. And Ava Woolridge, welcome back to the stream. Nice to see you again. Unfortunately, that was pretty much it. We're at the end of the stream. You hear the Majula and Fire Lake Shrine themes, one note each. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Creary is Hebrew. All right, so yeah, for everybody who's joined in over the stream, our first-time commenters like Calyx, thank you for joining and interacting with the chat. I appreciate that. All of the lurkers, I always appreciate you as well. We will be going live again tomorrow, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or technically today, depending on your time zone. I'm not so sure what our next lineup will be. Maybe I'll do the one Tarnished Archaeologist video that I was just talking about, as well as Max Derrat's other video, or maybe just a Crunchy. Yeah, because confining the videos to like 2 creators would be better, whereas I'd probably need to add more time for Max. I don't know. I'll figure it out. So yeah, right now I'm thinking the 3-part video by like Tarnished Archaeologist. Terrible with names. So look forward to that one tomorrow, and take care. Hopefully we'll see you then. Last Protagonist out. Be sure to like and subscribe.